Chapter 465. On the night of Taiha and Mountain Wind's arrival, the wind outside grew stronger. Snow filled the sky, and even the guards outside the cave couldn't handle it anymore. Zheng Luo had no choice but to call them in and take turns guarding the entrance. Otherwise, they would freeze to death outside. Even if they didn't freeze to death, they would be buried in the snow. But now, outside the cave, unless all the snow was swept away, the surrounding snow was like a thick wall, blocking all sight. One had to stand on high ground and sweep away the snow that blocked one's vision before one could see further. Xiao Xian stood on top, braving the wind and snow to look around. Between heaven and earth, everything was white. The strange rocky terrain was no longer rugged. It was drowned in a sea of white. At first glance, it looked like flat ground. Xiao Xian tried to use a straw rope to perform divination. He wanted to read the weather, as well as the chilling sense of danger that he couldn't understand. None of his attempts worked. He looked around. As far as he could see, there was no one else. Fox and Shen did not seem like they wanted to come out. After entering the cave, they moved the rocks back to their original positions. Many of the Yinjiao warriors looked at Xiao Xian, hoping to hear good news from Xiao Xian. It was because of Xiao Xian that they weren't as miserable as Taiha and Mountain Wind. To their disappointment, Xiao Xian shook his head silently. The cave grew quieter. At first, there were still people complaining and cursing the Fox and Shen tribesmen. But now, all their complaints were gone. They only hoped that this weather would end soon. Wu Zhan and some of the Taiha tribesmen knew each other. They were all elites of a younger generation. When the Taiha tribesmen arrived, they gathered to talk about their experiences. Now, no one was talking. Those who could sleep slept to reduce their energy consumption. Those who couldn't sleep just stared blankly. Hearing chewing sounds beside him, Wu Zhan kicked him. "What are you chewing?" "Grass." "Give me some." Taiha tribe's Fei Ong handed over half a stalk of grass. They would often carry some herbs with them, even if they didn't have much medicinal value. They would chew on these herbs for fun when they were bored and could calm their minds. When he handed it over, Fei Ong asked, "Your elders don't seem to have brought any good news." "There will be." Wu Zhan didn't say anything. He took the grass and chewed on it. It tasted bitter. He didn't know why the Taiha people liked to chew on this stuff. There was bound to be one. Everyone thought so. However, as the days passed, their hearts grew heavier and heavier. Every day, when they woke up or went out to pee, they would be shocked by the changes outside. It was as if there was no limit, and they didn't know where the limit was. This kind of change made people panic. If this continued, would the forest they lived in become a land of ice and snow? The thoughts of the younger warriors began to wander aimlessly. It was one thing for them to be in the land of ice and snow. Some of the tall mountains were covered in ice and snow all year round. However, they had never seen a place with such thick snow. This was an ordinary flat ground, and the snow was still falling. There were a few short pauses in the middle, but this trend showed no signs of stopping. "What should we do?" The three chiefs gathered together. Even though they had fire crystals in their hands, the current situation put them in a difficult position. Their initial excitement from digging up fire crystals had gradually died down. They definitely had to fight the Fox and Shen people. They had to come all this way and pay such a high price. Everyone was frustrated. However, this frustration was suppressed by the changes in the weather. They fell silent with bitter expressions. The burden on their shoulders was heavy, and they were under immense pressure. They didn't know what would happen to them, or if their tribe was safe. "If we knew this would happen, we wouldn't have come even if we had to give up the mines," said the Mountain Wind Chief in a low voice. But who would have expected such a huge change? Even the Fox and Shun tribesmen underestimated this change. The Taiha chief sighed helplessly. Who wouldn't regret it at a time like this? Seeing that Xiao Xian did not speak, walking back to the rock he had been sitting on for the past few days to continue spacing out, the three chiefs couldn't help but feel disappointed. The other two chiefs already knew that Yin Jiao could avoid the change in weather because of Xiao Xian. They had no one who could predict the weather, so they could only place their hopes on Xiao Xian. Good news or bad news, as long as they knew what was going to happen next, they would feel more at ease and be prepared. Sigh. Zheng Luo couldn't take it anymore. Whenever he was free, he liked to think. He stretched his stiff limbs, then jumped into the fire crystal pit and continued digging. The other two chiefs looked at each other, then got up to stretch their shoulders and jumped in as well. Let's dig. They would be more depressed if they stayed here quietly. Their progress was much slower now. The deeper they went, the harder the rocks became. Many of their digging tools were broken. Although they dug out more than 10 fire crystals, they were small and not enough to go around. Everyone absorbed a little, and it also gave the warriors a boost of energy. Xiao Xian sat on the converted salt rock and carefully felt the changes around him. Sound? He could hear the three chiefs digging in the pit next to him. Everyone's breathing could be heard clearly. Further away, there were whispers in the cave. Some were talking in their sleep, some were snoring. He could even feel that many people were spacing out in the dark with their eyes wide open. There was also the sound of wind blowing in through the vent. What else was there? There was also the sound of someone's heartbeat. Xiao Xian could almost hear the sound of his blood flowing in his body. Thump, thump. The sound of the heartbeat made Xiao Xian's eyebrows twitch. The sound of a heartbeat? The sound was very soft, but it felt very powerful. It seemed to echo in the rock with a lingering sound. His own heartbeat? No, not his own, not the people around him, and definitely not the other soldiers in the cave. Who was it? Whose heartbeat? Xiao Xian wanted to listen again to confirm, but after waiting for a while, he did not hear the sound again. Xiao Xian felt that he was very close to the answer, but he still felt like he was missing something. Just a little bit more. Just as Xiao Xian thought that the sound would not appear again, he heard it again. Thump, thump. It was still the same strong heartbeat as before, high in the front and low in the back. After listening carefully, Xiao Xian noticed that the last heartbeat was slightly louder than the previous one, but he wasn't sure if it was real. There was indeed a heartbeat, but it did not sound like a human's. It seemed to be very far away, but also very close. He could not be sure. It was not loud, but he could clearly hear the sound coming from the rock layer. "Chief, do you hear something?" Xiao Xian asked. Zheng Luo, who was digging in the fire crystals, paused. "Sound." The other people in the pit also stopped what they were doing and listened carefully. "No." They all shook their heads. "It's gone now, just now," Xiao Xian said. Hearing Xiao Xian's words, the others in the pit stopped digging and focused on listening to all the sounds in the cave. What kind of sound was it? The cave was too noisy. They had to figure it out. A heartbeat. It was not loud, but it felt very strong. It seemed to come from the rock layer, and there was an echo, Xiao Xian said carefully. That was even more puzzling. How could there be such a sound? The people in the pit were all patient. Their patience had been tested countless times during the hunt, so they were quite patient. However, after they stopped all their movements and listened carefully, they still did not hear Xiao Xian's voice. Zheng Luo was about to speak when Xiao Xian suddenly said, "There was another sound. Did you hear it?" The three chiefs looked at each other, seeing the confusion in each other's eyes. It was clear that they did not hear it. We looked at Duo Kong and the others. He saw that they were equally confused. "You really heard it?" Zheng Luo asked again. "I heard it 3 times, Xiao Xian said confidently. Now the three chiefs were not calm. It was not that they did not want to believe Xiao Xian, it was just that they really did not hear the sound Xiao Xian was talking about. The Taiha and Mountain Wind chiefs did not dare compare to Xiao Xian in predicting the weather. After all, Xiao Xian's predictions had been proven correct. However, they were confident in their hearing. It was not like they could not hear anything. The other two chiefs were skeptical, but Zheng Luo believed him. Xiao Xian was different from the others in many ways. The shamanists also believed in Xiao Xian. Therefore, Zheng Luo's expression was serious. If there really was such a sound, Xiao Xian, what do you think it was? I don't know, but the source of that sound is something I've always been wary of. Xiao Xian spoke his mind. Zheng Luo threw down the tools in his hand and climbed out of the hole. He said to Duo Kong, "Inform the others to be alert." Duo Kong did not waste time. He threw down the tools and ran away. His voice could be heard shouting as he ran. Seeing Zheng Luo like this, the other two chiefs were still suspicious. However, since the Yinjiao people were acting like this, they followed suit. The originally silent cave suddenly burst into an uproar because no one knew what was going on. Stay alert. Was some kind of danger coming? Xiao Xian, continue listening. Let us know if you find anything. Zheng Luo sat down beside Xiao Xian. He no longer cared about the fire crystals. They were important, but compared to the number of people in the team, it was secondary. The other two chiefs each carried a piece of salt and sat beside Xiao Xian. They wanted to see what this young Yinjiao elder had heard. At the same time, in the Fox tribe's cave on the other side of the mine, the Fox chief woke up after a nap and ran over to check on the progress of the fire crystals. "How's it going?" asked the chief. The supervisor beside the hole pointed at the basket by his feet. "There are not many more crystals." The Fox chief frowned. It was getting slower and slower. He was dissatisfied with the efficiency. However, the deeper they went, the more crystals there were. They could only wait patiently. "Continue. Don't let me find out who's slacking off." "Yes, sir." At the bottom of the hole, one of the Fox tribe's warriors dug with his shovel. He heard a clang and thought he had hit rock again. There was no more salt here, only rocks and soil. He had hit hard rocks a few times these few days, but this time his tool was badly damaged. "Shit." Looking at the deformed copper shovel, the warrior threw the shovel in his hand away, picked up a few new tools, and continued to dig. "I want to see what kind of rock this is." Chapter 466. Clang. The second shovel went up. The blade of the shovel was deformed again, but there was no trace of the stone on the ground. "Hey, I don't believe that I can't get it out." The man used the deformed shovel to scrape away the dust on the ground and some small stones around him. After wiping away the dust, he finally saw the stone. There was a small torch on the wall of the pit next to him. With the weak light, the man saw a piece of white on the ground. The color was like frozen snow, and it reflected the light. Could it be that he found a treasure? The man was overjoyed. While he was happy, someone squeezed over. "What is this? Let me see." "Hey, why are you squeezing over?" "I dug it out." The man shouted. "What's wrong?" The others in the pit heard the noise and came over. They saw the white on the ground and looked at it carefully. They didn't know what it was. They had never seen it before. "Is this ice?" Someone said. "Let me touch it. It's cold, but it's not ice. It's hard." Someone squatted down and touched it with his hand. "It's not ice. I think it's a kind of crystal." An older man guessed. "Crystal." Not only the man who found the stone first, but the others' eyes also lit up. Crystal was good. Although the price was different, even if it was only used for decoration, it would sell well in the city. Especially the slave owners, they liked it. However, in this salt mine, in this place where the fire crystals existed, it might be something extremely precious. Didn't you see that 2 of the shovels were broken? I'll report to the chief. The man with the fastest reaction rushed out of the pit and went to the chief to ask for credit. The others were slower. They stomped their feet in annoyance. "Why are you in such a hurry? Are you in a hurry to die?" The man who dug out the suspected crystal didn't leave. He was guarding his own piece of land. So what if someone went to ask for credit first? He dug out this piece, and the chief would reward him handsomely. The others in the pit were quick-witted. Seeing that there was a white piece under the man's feet, they quickly picked up their tools and quickly dug down. The others also reacted. Since the fire crystal was not only found in one place, then did they have such a crystal under their feet? That person had only dug deeper than them. Sure enough, after a short while, there was another crisp sound of metal colliding with hard objects. "Ha, I found it too." "Me too." "Same here." After removing all the rocks and soil, the people in the pit found that the ground beneath their feet was filled with this kind of white crystal. All of it. They couldn't find the edge at all. Perhaps this crystal was much bigger than they had imagined. It was an entire crystal slab. It is so hard. How do I pry a piece off? Someone tried a few tools, but only a small mark was left behind. Not a single chip was knocked off, and no digging could be done. Idiot. Prying also requires skill. An experienced excavator proudly turned over a chisel and a copper hammer. The man squatted down and carefully looked at the ground. Then he stopped at a spot and placed the chisel close to the ground. Then he swung the hammer with all his might. Only then did the others notice that this large piece of crystal on the ground was not flat. Instead, it had some wrinkles and some gaps. It seemed to be divided into pieces of similar size and shape. They were almost connected in a hexagonal shape. The edges of each piece were slightly lighter in color. There were bumps and depressions, which should be the gaps. And that person had stuck the sharp edge of the chisel at the bumps or depressions. Then he held the short shaft of the chisel and used his other hand to swing the hammer and hit the chisel heavily. Clang, clang, clang. If one strike couldn't pry it open, he would hit it a few more times. The hammer flashed, so fast that the knocking sound seemed to be connected. Ka! The chisel blade rolled up, and a white piece of crystal separated and flew up. The person next to him had sharp eyes and fast hands. He stepped on the wall of the pit and jumped up to grab the white piece that was less than the size of a palm. And the hexagonal mark on the ground was missing a small corner. The person who grabbed the white crystal came to the side of the torch and used the light to observe what this white crystal was. The others also came closer to take a look. The supervisors above all went down to take a look. Crystal, it must be a crystal. Look, there seems to be a pattern on it. What pattern is this? Is it a frozen snowflake? What's a snowflake? This is a crystal flower. Someone showed off his knowledge. It looks like it. The person holding the crystal bit it and shivered from the cold. It's cold. It's so hard. Quick, pry a few more pieces off before the chief comes. The others thought the same. They didn't waste any more time and quickly snatched the chisels and hammers. Those who couldn't snatch anything started fighting. There were not only fox people in this pit, there were also Shin tribesmen. When it came to benefits, it was easy for conflicts to arise. The person who got the chisel started swinging the hammer. The fox chief was discussing with the Shun tribesmen about their gains and future plans. The people they sent out had already found out about Taiha and Mountain Wind's movements. However, the people they sent out to spy on them were discovered and lost. They were killed by the enemy. The three tribes were coming aggressively, and the situation wasn't looking good either. They didn't know if they would come over to snatch their things, so they had to be on guard. They had made long-term preparations. Although they didn't expect the weather to change so drastically, they had food and fur. They also collected a lot of firewood. As they were discussing, the person digging for the fire crystals came over excitedly to report that they had found a new crystal. This was indeed good news. The fox and Shin chiefs stopped talking and hurried over to see what was going on. If it's really a new crystal, I wonder how much it's worth. The Shin chief walked towards the pit with a face full of joy. No matter what, it's a good thing. I told you, you won't lose out on this choice. The fox chief was excited too. Let me see. What kind of crystal is it? They did not notice that the bird from the Shun tribe and the fox from the fox tribe, who had been ignored for a few days, were now trembling all over. They tried their best to hide in a corner, trying to reduce their presence. No one dared to pull them away. No one dared to call them out. They were as still as rocks. It wasn't that they didn't want to make a sound. They were too scared to make a sound. Everyone else thought they were just frozen. In Yanjiao's salt cave, Xiao Xian listened carefully to the heartbeat. The interval between each heartbeat is shorter now. It's louder too. Xiao Xian described what he heard to Zheng Luo and the others. Even if the three chiefs couldn't hear it themselves, their hearts pounded nervously as they listened to Xiao Xian's description. They couldn't hear it themselves, but they had to rely on others to tell them. It didn't feel good. Wait, something's wrong. Xiao Xian's sudden words made the three chiefs jump up. What's wrong? The interval between heartbeats is shorter. It's getting louder. It's changing so fast. Xiao Xian broke out in cold sweat. He didn't know what it was. It was just a physiological reaction. He couldn't control it. The three chiefs' hearts were in their throats. They stared at Xiao Xian, waiting for Xiao Xian to continue. But Xiao Xian's next words made them feel like they had fallen into an ice cave. Chief, I have a guess. Xiao Xian gulped, suppressing the trembling in his heart. He hadn't felt this way in a long time. He still remembered when he got lost during his early days of hunting. You, tell us. Zheng Luo stuttered. I suspect that there's a king beast down there. Xiao Xian said this sentence word by word. Every word he said was like a hammer hammering into the hearts of the three. King, king. The three chiefs opened their mouths, but couldn't finish. King beasts only existed in the records left behind by their ancestors. Most of them had only heard of them. Even the ancestors who left behind the records may not have seen them with their own eyes. They only knew of such creatures from their ancestors' records, from the stories passed down from generation to generation. No one wanted to face a king beast. It was a true king. In the stories passed down, there were many stories of a king beast destroying an entire tribe. They didn't want to know the truth of the stories, but they couldn't deny that no one wanted to meet such a legendary creature. But now, they really hoped that Xiao Xian was scaring them, that it was just Xiao Xian's imagination. A long time ago, I met a king beast. I feel the same way now, Xiao Xian said, suppressing his shock. As for the three leaders beside him, they were all stunned. If they had only felt a little regret before, now they were so regretful that they wanted to bang their heads against a wall. That was a king beast. It was not those random ferocious beasts that they usually hunted. How could they fight it? Even if all the people in the cave worked together, could they really fight it? If not for Xiao Xian, they wouldn't even be able to hear the king beast's heartbeat. Even if the three chiefs fought with their lives, they might not be able to save everyone in the team. This was a dream. This had to be a dream. In the fox cave, the fox and Shin chief went down to the pit and watched the others work. They held a piece of cold crystal in their hands. There was no joy on their faces. Instead, there was an inexplicable sense of panic, so much so that they couldn't breathe. Wait, stop. Stop prying. I told you to stop prying. The fox chief roared. The others looked at them, confused. They didn't understand why their chiefs were so angry. The pit fell silent. Crack, 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 crack. The soft sounds were very clear in the silence. A soul-stirring pressure and a chill that seeped into his bones instantly enveloped his entire body. A supervisor in the pit lowered his head stiffly and looked at the sword in his hand. He saw that the tip of the sword that was pressed against the surface of the crystal was beginning to be covered with a layer of white frost. The frost was spreading upwards at a speed visible to the naked eye. The temperature in the pit dropped rapidly, and the two leaders who reacted quickly had already climbed up along the walls of the pit. As for the people who reacted slower, they found that they could no longer walk. Their feet were frozen on the crystal, and they thought that their feet were numb from the cold, but now they found that they were not numb from the cold, but completely frozen, and even their blood was frozen. Whoosh! The white crystal beneath their feet began to move. Frozen, they could only be dragged towards the walls of the pit. They couldn't escape. Even if they chopped off their feet, the frost had already spread past their waists. They couldn't feel their lower bodies anymore. Bang! 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 A series of crashing sounds came from the pit. The fox chief didn't need to look down and know that the people below had been sliced into pieces. Chapter 467. There was a sizzling sound in the cave, like the sound of rocks rubbing against each other. The ground under his feet trembled with these sizzling sounds. White frost quickly spread out from the pit where the fire crystals were dug out. It was like an unstoppable tide, spreading to the surroundings with great force. The fox and Shin chiefs no longer had any other thoughts. They just wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. They were panicking, their faces pale. Perhaps they had realized what was beneath them. They regretted it even more than the flaming horns. Why did they have to dig so deep into the ground? If they had found out earlier that there was an irresistible giant beast below, they would have been extremely careful. Even if it was snowing outside, they would have taken the fire crystals that they had dug out and returned to the tribe through the night. They would have given up the salt mine and everything here and never come back again. But now, it was too late to regret. They had already opened the door to violence under the wind and snow. "Run! Get out of here!" shouted the fox chief. He was no longer calm. Instead, he was filled with panic and despair that even he didn't want to believe. The other fox and Shun people in the cave did not know what was going on. They just felt their hearts skip a beat. It was a sense of oppression and fear. For a moment, their legs turned to jelly. Hearing the fox chief's words, chaos broke out in the cave. Some pushed aside the rocks blocking the entrance and rushed out. Others huddled against the walls. Those who were lying in the cave, those who were sleeping, or those who did not have time to react were trampled to the ground by the people rushing out. They wailed in pain, but no one spared them a glance. Even if they wanted to help, they could not. At this time, even the slowest person would have realized that something strange had happened in the cave. After all, they had lived in the mountains and forests for a long time, so they had a basic ability to predict danger. The stronger ones forcefully pushed the people in front of them aside and squeezed their way out. Due to the limited width of the cave entrance, it was fine when nothing happened. Now that something had happened, everyone wanted to rush out. If they were careless, they would be blocked, and people would be squeezed out of shape. The fox chief ran out from the depths of the cave. He stepped on the heads of the people blocking the entrance and rushed out. The others realized this was possible too. They followed suit. Some jumped too high and hit the ceiling, bleeding. They did not even wipe the blood off, continuing to rush forward. Some pushed aside the people in front of them. The cave became more chaotic. The more anxious the people were, the more they felt there was danger. Didn't they see the chief running out? Crack, crack, crack. In the lower layer of the salt cave, the white frost continued to spread out quickly. Some people who were stuck at the back felt that the temperature around them had dropped sharply. The water vapor that they exhaled was instantly condensed. Their skin was frozen into a block without any warmth. Fortunately, they had moved away from the pit and were not close to the fire crystals. Compared to those who were directly frozen, they were in a much better situation. These changes were not limited to the fox's cave. In the Shan cave, more than 500 people were brought here by the fox and fox tribes. There were still some before, but they were killed by the Yinjiao, people who came to the mines. There were fox and Shun people in this cave too. They were guarding the deeper parts of the cave. There was still salt to be mined. They were guarding the cave to prevent outsiders from taking it away. At the same time, they were keeping an eye on them to prevent them from digging too. There were more than 1,000 people in the cave. When they discovered the frost in the lower layer of the cave, those guards felt something was wrong. Feeling the power that made their scalps numb, the ground under their feet trembled differently than usual, and hearing the chi-chi sound from the rocks, they immediately fled outside and left this cold place. Similar changes were happening in the other 3 caves. The Yinjiao cave was already covered in white frost. Seeing this, Xiao Xian and the 3 chiefs hurriedly moved out of the way. The change was too sudden and too fast. The ground beneath their feet was covered in a layer of frost. There was no place for them to hide in the cave. They had to step on the frost. Luckily, this only happened in the lower levels of the cave. Although the upper levels were cold too, it was much better. Zheng Luo moved his feet with difficulty and led the warriors from the lower level up. The coldness from the soles of his feet shot up his legs. His blood vessels felt like they were filled with ice. Should we escape? Zheng Luo asked Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian shook his head reflexively, then snapped out of it. I don't know what that is, but I feel like running out like this isn't a good idea. Then stay in the cave for now. Duo Kong, tell the warriors to be quiet and hide their auras. Just like when we were hiding in the forest. Don't show any murderous intent, Zheng Luo said in a low voice. After the initial panic, Zheng Luo had calmed down a little, but his voice was still trembling. It was his first time facing such a situation, and he didn't know what to do. But since Xiao Xian said so, he did as he was told. The Taiha and Mountain Wind chiefs were the same. They didn't dare to doubt Xiao Xian now. They didn't know what to do either. They would do whatever they saw Yinjiao. Because the people from the lower levels had joined in, there was almost no passage in the upper levels. Zheng Luo and the rest had to squeeze through the crowd. But with the 3 chiefs holding the line, no one dared to mess around. When they saw them, they would make space for them to move around. When they reached the entrance, Xiao Xian pushed aside the stone blocking the entrance. They would clear the snow around the entrance every once in a while. Although it wasn't long now, and the snow was half a person's height, it didn't stop them from looking into the distance. It was just that they couldn't see too far. Someone went out over there, said Zheng Luo when he heard the commotion. He could already hear someone from Fox's side screaming. Should we go out and take a look? Asked Tai's leader. Although they were afraid and worried, They were also curious. Wait! Xiaoxian stopped them. Listen. Psst. The stone acted as a medium to transmit the sound. It sounded like something was moving under their feet. The cave was completely silent. Everyone else had been warned, and now they were filled with a sense of crisis. They held their breaths and held their breath. Therefore, the hissing sound in the cave was very clear, and it made the hair on their backs stand up. It's a big guy. Are we really not going out? The upper levels aren't as sturdy as the lower levels. What if it collapses? Said Mountain Wind's leader. Zheng Luo and the others looked at Xiaoxian. Xiaoxian was under a lot of pressure. His choice would determine the fate of almost 3,000 people. Intuition. Trust your intuition. Stay in the cave, said Xiaoxian again. Then stay in the cave. Zheng Luo gestured to Duokong. Duokong gulped and squeezed into the cave to tell the other Yinjiao about Zheng Luo's decision. The person who didn't even hesitate when facing the beasts in the forest was trembling now. Taiha and Mountain Wind's leaders looked at each other, their eyes conflicted. The upper levels of the cave really weren't that sturdy, especially near the entrance. Otherwise, it wouldn't have collapsed so easily. It couldn't even withstand the attack of a giant beast, much less a king beast. It would probably collapse with one blow. If the cave collapsed, these people would all be buried. But if they ran away before the giant beast came out, maybe there was still a chance? Who would want to stay here and face a king beast? To wait for death. Even if the cave didn't collapse, they would freeze to death. The Mountain Wind Chief had just said 2 words when the Taiha Chief said to the person next to him, "We'll do the same as the Flaming Horns. We'll go in and inform everyone. We'll do whatever the Flaming Horns do." Mountain Wind's words were stuck in his throat. He wanted to say that they should run, but now. Hesitation, still hesitation. Chief. The people around Mountain Wind's chief, Lanmu, were already urging them to leave. They were divided into 2 factions. Some agreed with Taiha and Flaming Horn's decision, while others thought that since the fox people had already escaped, they should escape too. We should, before Lanmu could finish. The sizzling grew louder and the ground shook more violently. "It's coming out," whispered Xiaoxian. "It's coming out? What do we do?" We were planning to run. Lanmu panicked. There was a loud boom. The ground shook, even the snow walls outside the cave shook. The road that had been cleared was once again covered by the snow that had fallen from the sky. Now, they couldn't see the situation outside. The cave entrance was pitch black. Screech, a long, coarse sound of salt being swept up by the wind and scraping against the rocks resounded between heaven and earth. At first, it sounded a little hoarse, but it was also sharp, as if it was real, scraping against the nerves in people's heads, causing goosebumps to appear all over their bodies. An uncontrollable feeling of trembling rose up from their bones, and even their hair wanted to stand on end. The sound waves spread and seeped into the cave. The warriors with lower strength had blood flowing out of their ears. They were in a daze for a while before coming back to their senses. However, their hearing was affected for a while. They could not hear the whispers of the people next to them. They could only read their lips. Amidst the long howl, the sound waves were like a fierce gale, blowing away almost all the snow in the salt mine. The 10-meter-high layer of snow shattered into snowballs of different sizes. It was as if time had reversed. They flew into the air and were swept away by the wind. Half of the snow that had covered the cave entrance disappeared in an instant. Xiaoxian reached out and pushed away the snow that was blocking the cave entrance. A gust of cold wind blew into the cave through the gap. At this time, he did not mind the cold, including the 3 chiefs. The people closest to the cave were all leaning against the rocks or standing on their tiptoes to see the situation in the distance. The snow at the cave entrance fell from 10 meters to less than 2 meters. A white, python-like beast rushed up from a part of the salt mine. When it leaped into the air, it swung its body and wantonly stirred up the snowstorm. It seemed that this kind of weather was not a difficult environment for it. On the contrary, this kind of weather made it very happy. It was so happy that it jumped up. Chapter 468. What is that? Zheng Luo said the 4 words in 2 sentences. It was obvious that the scene just now had shocked him. It wasn't just Zheng Luo. Everyone else in the cave would not be able to stay calm. When they were in the forest, their first thought was how to kill the beast, how to split it, how to eat it, how to use it, how to exchange its skin for something. The moment they saw this giant beast, even though they couldn't see what it looked like due to the snowstorm, they still felt a sense of crisis as they looked at it from afar. They couldn't fight it. That was Zheng Luo's conclusion. It's a snake, right? Do snakes cry like that? Why would they come out in this weather? The three chiefs whispered to each other. Outside, the anaconda beast charged out of the salt mine and landed among the strange rocks around the mine. The snow-filled rocks rumbled. The strange rocks were easily swept away like decorations. A single swipe of its tail would bring down a large patch of rocks. All Xiao Xian and the others could see from inside the cave was rocks being swept up into the sky and thrown far away. Duo Kong gulped again. He wanted to speak, but no words came out. This was the first time he felt this way since he was born. The ferocious beasts in the forest, even the most ferocious beasts he had ever encountered, were simply insignificant compared to the one outside. It could sweep away the hard rocks without a scratch on its body. How could skin even cut through? The anaconda beast leveled the ground in its path, but cleverly avoided the salt mine. All the rocks were swept to the other side, as if it was purposely clearing a path. Xiao Xian even saw people being swept up along with the rocks. However, those people did not have any signs of life, as if they were dead. They were thrown away along with the rocks. Those were the people who had escaped. The chief of the fox tribe had wanted to escape with his men, but they could not. The thick layer of snow and the buried rocks were a huge hindrance to them. Even if they wanted to avoid the beast, they could not just ram their heads into rocks. The giant beast was very fast, heading straight for the fox leader and the rest. Hearing the approaching commotion, the woman in the fox leader's arms tugged at him. Go back. They might not be able to escape, but they could take the risk and return. The fox leader frowned. He did not want to take the risk, but the road ahead was blocked by the thick layer of snow. Even breathing became difficult after a while. Even if he got out of the strange rock field, he still had to face the wider salt field, which was even more dangerous. Moreover, he didn't bring any food when he left the cave. The woman tugged at him again and gave him a look. Let's go back that way. The fox chief gritted his teeth and changed his direction. He turned back, but not the way he came. Instead, he ran towards the Shun cave. He quickly waved the sword in his hand, sweeping away the thick layer of snow in front of him like a broom. He could also recognize the path ahead. If the sword hit a rock, he would go around it. Seeing this, some people followed him. Along the way, they met the chief of the Shun tribe and other people. Perhaps they all had the same idea and walked in the same direction. Other than them, there were others who returned too. However, they didn't head towards the Shun cave. Instead, they went back the way they came. Although they had missed the direction of the giant beast's sweep, the crisis was not over yet. Previously, when they escaped from the salt cave, they had a hard time avoiding all kinds of rocks. Now, in a large area near the salt mine, there was nothing left except for some traces of rocks on the ground that could easily trip people. There was no thick layer of snow, no irregular rock forest. They turned back quickly. To avoid being targeted by the beast, they did not even dare to look behind them. They did not stop at all, running as fast as they could towards their destination. Hence, the people who escaped from the cave were split into 4 groups. One group still wanted to leave this place and ran further away. Another group was scattered in the rock forest and lost their way, enduring the pressure of the snow and the lack of oxygen. The third group went back the way they came, back to the cave. The fourth group followed the fox chief, heading towards the Shun cave. There were 5 caves in the salt mine, located in 5 different locations. That was why Xiao Xian and the rest had no way of knowing what was going on over there. However, based on the current situation, staying in the caves was indeed the best choice. At least, that was the case for now. They had not escaped under the snow, but they could imagine how difficult it was. What do we do? Hearing the rumbling sounds from afar, even the arrogant Lan Mu, the mountain wind chief who liked to look down on others, could not help but tremble. He lowered his voice and asked the others. As a chief, he was helpless against such a beast. At the same time, He was relieved that they did not go out. If they did, they might not have been able to escape. The others were silent. The weather change was enough for them. Who knew there was an even bigger problem? This was not something they could deal with easily. If they really fought, they did not know what kind of price they would have to pay. It was possible that they would all be wiped out. They did not know what to do. They had never experienced something like this before. Hence, the three chiefs looked at Xiao Xian again. Up until now, Xiao Xian's decision had been correct. Xiao Xian, any ideas? Asked Zheng Luo. Xiao Xian thought for a moment. Send someone down to check. If it's not as cold as before, send a group down. I'll go. Duo Kong volunteered. He just wanted to find something to do. Otherwise, he would feel uncomfortable. This was the first time he felt this way. The beast outside was still clearing the strange rocks. It was probably circling around the salt mine area. Every now and then, it would appear in Xiao Xian's field of vision. Do you guys think it noticed us? Asked the Taihe chief. Zheng Luo and Lanmu looked at him at the same time, but did not say anything. The beast that looked like a giant python did not seem to be in a hurry to come over. Instead, it was slowly clearing the area around it. Xiao Xian, how do you feel? Asked Zheng Luo. Instead of asking the other two chiefs, it was better to ask his own tribe's elder. How do I feel? Xiao Xian thought carefully. I feel that it's in a good mood. The three chiefs were disappointed. No matter whether the beast was in a good mood or not, it was not good for them. Duo Kong had already returned from the lower level. He arranged for some people to go down. The crowded cave was suddenly much more relaxed. The air was much smoother, but it was still cold. Looks like the frost came from that beast. If it comes this way, we have to avoid it, said Duo Kong. After running for a while, his body was not so stiff, and he could speak more clearly. Now that he thought it through, so what if he died? He was not lonely with so many people. It was just a pity that he could not see Duo Li get married and have children. Just as Duo Kong finished speaking, he heard Xiao Xian say, "It's coming." The beast outside was heading towards the salt mine. It was neither fast nor slow. It even had the mood to clear the uneven ground. When it swept through the strange stone forest, a layer of snow fell on the place it had swept, so it left a long, winding trail behind it. The beast was heading towards Xiao Xian and the others. Seeing the situation outside, they were terrified. They prayed in their hearts, "Don't come here, please don't come here. Go and harm Fox and the others." The beast climbed up the salt mine. As it got closer, Xiao Xian could see it more clearly. The giant beast did indeed look like a snake, but its head was different. It was more angular, and there were also some protruding, icicle-like things distributed around its head. As the beast approached, the temperature in the cave dropped. Xiao Xian gestured for everyone to back off. Luckily, he had arranged for some people to go to the lower levels. Otherwise, they would not be able to retreat quickly. After the beast climbed up the salt mine, it passed by the top of the cave. Even without light, Xiao Xian could hear the sound of frost in the cave. Whoosh! The giant beast's scales scraped against the uneven surface of the salt mine, and the sound was clearly transmitted into the cave. It was like a brush covered in ice, sweeping over everyone's heads. Many people shivered and shrunk their necks. When the sound faded away, Xiao Xian took out a glowing crystal wrapped tightly in animal skin to light up the cave. They had already made way for the area directly below the giant beast. At this moment, a large area from the top to the bottom of the cave was covered in a layer of frost. There was a herb that someone had dropped on the ground. It was covered in frost and shattered into pieces when stepped on. That's the king beast. Zheng Luo breathed out slowly. It went to... Xiao Xian listened and recognized it. He pointed in a direction. That way? That's the fox cave, said Zheng Luo. Could the fox have dug it out from the fire crystals? Duo Kong shuddered. He had dug a hole too. Luckily, it was not deep. They did not know if it was the truth. They could only listen carefully to the sounds and guess what happened. In any case, they would definitely not leave the cave now. At that moment, the fox chief led a group of people to hide in the Shun cave. When they entered, they realized that the bird and fox they did not bring were both here. They even found a corner to hide. On the other side, The people hiding in the salt caves of the fox tribe heard the approaching sounds, and their teeth chattered. Frost appeared at the entrance of the cave. It was a freezing sound. The people in the cave rushed into the depths of the cave. With a pung sound, the stone that was blocking the entrance of the cave disappeared in the blink of an eye. A beast head covered in white scales that looked like ice crystals appeared at the entrance of the cave. To a human, the cave was already very big, but to this giant beast, it was still one size smaller. The people in the cave heaved a sigh of relief when the beast could not enter. They stood far away, looking nervously at the strange beast head at the entrance. Its eyes were as cold as ice, its pupils as sharp as swords, staring into the cave as if it wanted to freeze the air. It looked into the cave. Then, it suddenly opened its mouth and roared. The piercing sound rushed into the cave, bringing with it white frost. It rushed into the depths of the cave. Chapter 469. The inside of the cave was pitch black. In the deepest part of the cave, where the fire crystals were dug out, about 10 people were waving their weapons, trying to pry the fire crystals out of the ground. When the incident happened, the fox and Shin chiefs were in a hurry to escape. They did not have time to take the fire crystals with them. The basket of fire crystals beside them was kicked over. The fire crystals scattered on the ground, frozen by the frost from the pit. There were indeed some who left with the fox tribe's chief, but there were also some who did not manage to escape. They missed the best chance to escape and stayed in the cave. Some of them felt that staying in the cave was the safest, so they did not follow their chief out of the cave. Now, the leader was not here, and the people in the cave were either dead or injured. No one cared about them. According to the people who ran out and came back, there was a huge, ferocious beast outside. They could not fight it, so they could only come back and hide. Some people knew about the fire crystals, so they came here trying to pry the fire crystals out of the ground. The fire crystals were very attractive to totemic warriors. For people were digging, one person holding a torch. Not far away, there were about 20 people guarding, preventing others from coming over to take the crystals. Fortunately, the people who escaped into the cave did not rush all the way to the innermost part of the cave. They were worried that the innermost part of the cave was not safe because there was a lot of frost and people who had frozen to death. If it was safe, the two chiefs would not have run out. Beside the fire crystal pit, the person holding the torch felt cold even though he was close to the fire source. The ground around him was covered in white frost. They didn't see what happened here with their own eyes, but they could guess from what they saw. Hurry up, the guard not far away urged them. They felt that the surroundings were too cold. It would be great if they could use the fire crystals. It's just a fire crystal. Why are we taking so long? Someone muttered. Easy for you to say. Do you know how hard the ice is? The swordsmen were panting. They didn't understand why the closer they got to the hole, the harder the ice became. Moreover, the ice here was different from the ice outside. It was too hard. Even though half of the fire crystals were already exposed, it was still difficult to pry them out. The bronze weapons in their hands were not very good. They could only be considered ordinary. They were the kind that the merchants in cities sold in large batches. It was even more difficult to use them. As the swords and sabers slashed down, ice shards splashed onto their faces, necks, and mouths. A warrior shrunk his neck and shook his body. He stuck out his tongue and licked the ice chips that had splashed onto his mouth. Salty, the man said. Nonsense, of course the water in the salt cave is salty. It is so cold. Suddenly hearing the noise, a warrior who was guarding not far away asked in a trembling voice, what happened outside the cave? The restlessness of the crowd in the cave made them very uneasy. He could vaguely hear someone shouting, it's outside, it's outside. That giant beast has come in. The people guarding there panicked. No, it can't come in. It definitely can't come in. It wasn't clear whether he was comforting himself or convincing others. But the people in front, before he finished speaking, they heard a roar. At this moment, the people in the upper level of the salt cave seemed to have encountered a strong wind with frost. It blew so hard that they stopped breathing and couldn't open their eyes. It was as if they were in a snowstorm outside the cave. In the lower level of the salt cave, a warrior raised his hand to block the wind. The wind here was not as strong as above. After all, there were many people in the upper level of the cave. They blocked most of the strong wind. "Hey, the people in front, what happened?" A warrior shouted against the wind. No one responded. Ka ka ka. They seemed to have heard such a sound in their ears. Beside the fire crystal pit, the people who were holding weapons to pry out the fire crystals also stopped. The torches beside them had been extinguished by the wind just now. The heat source disappeared, and the cold was bone-chilling. The warrior who held the extinguished torch quickly hid in a sunken place behind the pit based on his memory. He took out the prepared tools to ignite the fire with his back to the wind. He skillfully identified the gelatinous substance smeared on the end of the ignition stick. Then he took out a flint and rubbed it. Whoosh! The flame ignited on the ignition stick. The fire was not hot enough. He wanted to ignite the torch. The wind became weaker. He should be able to ignite the torch. However, before he could ignite the torch, the fire on the ignition stick went out instantly. Damn it! After cursing, the warrior felt the temperature around him getting lower and lower. He breathed in the air that almost froze his lungs. He whispered to the warriors who were digging for the fire crystals a few steps away. "Do any of you have any fire sticks? I've used up the last one." No one responded. There was dead silence around. The warrior wanted to say something, but he found that his consciousness seemed to have begun to leave this body. He could no longer feel the cold around him. He only felt that his body was heavy and stiff. He could not move until he completely lost consciousness. If there was light, one would find that the warrior was covered with a layer of frost from his face to his feet. A few steps away, the people who were digging for the fire crystals were still holding their weapons. They stood there stiffly, without any breath or breath. There were more than 20 guards not far away, but there was no heartbeat. The cracking sounds around continued. The frost covered the entire upper and lower levels of the salt cave. All life stopped. On the other side, in Yinjiao's salt cave, the three chiefs were expressionless. They did not know what expression to show. They had heard the sound just now. They could feel the murderous intent in it. Strangely, the murderous intent was not very strong. It was a gut feeling. Maybe it doesn't care about us at all. It just wants to take revenge on the people who disturbed it. Xiao Xian tried to sound positive. Although he wanted to comfort them, he was not spouting nonsense. Just like when he got lost in the King Stoneworm's cave, the stones around him were changing. He was not too far away from the King Stoneworm. He did not believe that the King Stoneworm did not sense his presence. It was just ignoring it. It was like how people would ignore an ant when walking on the road. Or maybe it's in a good mood today. That's why the murderous intent is not strong. Zheng Luo probed. Xiao Xian had said that the king beast was in a good mood. No matter what, just don't provoke it. Although the king beast's temper was worse than the king stoneworm's, it was still better than the fearsome beasts in the forest. Ignoring it was fine. It was a good thing for them. Suddenly, there was a tremor, then another and another. But each time, it was getting further and further away. Xiao Xian hurried to the entrance of the cave. He did not stay for long. The gap in the cave was once again covered by snow. Pushing the snow aside, Xiao Xian looked outside. He saw a snake-like figure in the snow. It moved and crawled on the ground, then jumped up again. It was really lively. When the sound was far away and could no longer be heard, everyone in the cave let out a long sigh of relief. Did it leave? Zheng Luo asked. It should have left for now. I don't know when it will come back. After all, this is its nest, Xiao Xian said. I'll go take a look. I'll go too. Zheng Luo turned to Duo Kong. Keep an eye on the people in the cave. Don't let them run out. Seeing Zheng Luo and Xiao Xian leave, the other two chiefs decided to go take a look too. They wanted to know what was going on outside. Now that the king beast was gone, they had to take this chance. This was a rare opportunity. If they could make it back alive, they might be able to record this experience on a scroll so that the future generations of the tribe would know that there was such a magical place where a king beast lived. They had been mining salt in this magical place for hundreds of years. At the same time, they could confirm if they could leave this place. Listening carefully, Xiao Xian pushed the boulder aside and hurried out. When the other three chiefs came out, he pushed the boulder back into the cave. It was still windy outside. Snow filled the air. It was much colder than inside the cave. The strange rock field had been flattened and covered in a thick layer of snow. "Let's go check out the fox cave," Zheng Luo suggested. The four of them carefully walked in that direction, following the tracks left behind by the giant beast until they reached the fox tribe's salt cave. Wherever the beast had crawled, there was a layer of hard frost. They felt a chill from the soles of their feet. When they saw the state of the fox cave, they felt a little cold was nothing. At least it was better than these unlucky bastards. The entrance to the fox cave was covered in a thick layer of ice. The frost had shrunk the entrance to the cave. There was now a layer of ice almost a meter high at the entrance. They jumped on it and walked into the cave. Zheng Luo held the glowing crystal and had a clear view of the cave. Near the entrance of the cave, there were people frozen under the layer of ice. They should have been trampled here when they were escaping. As they walked further in, they saw some broken pieces. Yes, broken pieces. The frozen people cracked one by one. A chill ran up their spines. The hairs on the back of their necks stood on end. Even the hearts of the three leaders trembled violently. Xiao Xian lifted his foot and continued walking. There were a few people blocking the path, all of them standing. Their bodies were intact, but they were all frozen and covered in a layer of white. Passing through the gaps, the four of them arrived at the lower level of the cave. They thought the lower level would be better, but it was not. Although there were no other signs of life here, they could not help but feel fear when they saw it for themselves. They were covered in a layer of white frost. They could vaguely make out their expressions and guess what they wanted to do before they were frozen. Fire crystals? As they got closer, Zheng Luo sensed the presence of fire crystals. As soon as they heard the words fire crystals, the other two leaders immediately cast aside the fear they felt just now. Seeing the frozen fire crystals on the ground, the three chiefs became enthusiastic. The king beast was not here. There were no other living people in the cave, and there were fire crystals on the ground. What should they do? Dig. Chapter 470. There were fire crystals on the ground. Half of them had been dug out by the fox people, but now they were all frozen. They had to dig again. However, the three chiefs had better tools and were stronger too. With the illumination of the glowing crystals, they dug faster. But they were alert as they dug, in case other people came like the fox and Shun tribesmen. Xiao Xian planned to jump into the pit they dug for the fire crystals. There was a layer of white ice on the walls of the pit. He tied a rope to the bottom and slid down along the straw rope. The hole was deep and slippery. It was easier to use a rope. After Xiao Xian entered the hole, he landed where the beast used to be. After the beast left, this was a long tunnel. The walls were covered in a layer of white ice. Although it was thin, it was frozen together with the rock. It was very hard. The temperature was so low that Xiao Xian could not even feel the warmth of his breath. He could feel that there were fire crystals all around this tunnel. Perhaps this giant beast stayed in this place because of the fire crystals, just like the Bat King of the past. However, even after so many years, this snake still hadn't come out. Hibernating for a few hundred years? That was really long. He wondered how big it was. Waving his sword, he cut through the ice and dug out a fire crystal embedded in the wall. Sensing it, Xiao Xian realized that this fire crystal had been absorbed before. It was just not completely absorbed. That snake? Regardless, Xiao Xian sped up and waved the sword in his hand. He didn't need the glowing crystal. With his special vision, he could see the fire crystals on the wall clearly. His attacks were accurate. Zing! Zing! In an instant, the entire tunnel was filled with the sounds of digging, as well as Zheng Luo and the rest digging. After Zheng Luo and the rest had collected all the fire crystals, they even dug out the crystals from the frozen bodies of the fox people and put them all into their own pouches. Only then did the three of them jump into the long tunnel below. I was planning to snatch the salt mine from Fox. I didn't expect to snatch their fire crystals instead. The Taiha leader laughed. No matter what, he was able to get the fire crystals. His heavy heart was finally comforted. The Fox team had already reached the fire crystal layer. Each crystal was bigger than the ones in Yinjiao's salt cave. The three leaders rested for a moment before continuing their operation. No one knew how long the Beast King would be gone. They had to take advantage of the opportunity to dig as much as they could. They would leave when the Beast King returned. I've lived for so long, but I've never seen so many fire crystals. The Taiha tribe's leader's breathing quickened. No one knew if he was tired or happy. I've lived for almost 80 years, but I've never seen so many fire crystals. Lamu of the Mountain Wind tribe sighed. Xiao Xian paused in his digging. Zheng Luo was silent too. The Taiha leader glanced at Zheng Luo, but didn't say anything. The three leaders looked about the same age, around 40 years old. But in reality, they were much older than Zheng Luo. Perhaps others who didn't know the Yinjiao tribes didn't know this, but the Taiha tribe, who had lived with the Yinjiao for a long time, knew that among all the tribes, the Yinjiao had the shortest average lifespan. Xiao Xian only found out later. He had sensed it on the other side of the sea, but wasn't sure. He only found out after coming here. The Yinjiao people were different in many ways, but there was one thing that made them different from other tribes. They were like the most ordinary people without any power. That was their lifespan. Among the people from the Taiha tribe who came this time, there were many who were over 100 years old, but they looked like they were still in their prime. However, in the Flaming Horn tribe, those over 100 years old, even if they were still alive, would definitely not be able to hunt. They could only help with farming and couldn't do anything too tiring. At the end of their lives, they would age very quickly because their lives were incomplete. This was something they didn't expect when the fire seed split. The reason why the ancestors felt so guilty in the notes they left behind was not only because they could not return to their homeland, but more importantly, they felt the punishment brought to them by the splitting of the fire seed. They did not have a complete lifespan. The Flaming Horns were stronger than other tribes in many aspects, but in terms of lifespan, there was a knife hanging over their heads. Before they could finish their journey, their lifespan would be cut off mercilessly. Perhaps the shaman on the other side of the sea knew about this too, but didn't tell anyone. Plus, the Yinjiao tribe had always been isolated from the rest of the world, so no one noticed this problem. They didn't feel any negative emotions or pressure. The people here didn't interact much with the outside world either, so most people didn't know. Perhaps some of the warriors knew, but kept it to themselves. Back then, the ancestors of the tribe allowed intermarriage with other tribes. Perhaps they wanted to use this opportunity to solve this problem. Unfortunately, it didn't work. The blood of the Flaming Horns was too strong, and the blood of other tribes couldn't suppress it. When Xiao Xian first came here, most of the ancestral notes he read were filled with guilt, but they didn't mention the reason. It was only when Xiao Xian returned to the tribe from Gongjia Mountain and practiced controlling the ancestral bone ornaments that the shaman told him. Many people in the tribe knew their lifespan wasn't as long as other tribes, but they didn't know the reason. Some people thought it was because the Yinjiao people's lifespan was used to increase their strength. They were given divine strength, so they were stripped of other things. Many people felt better when they thought about it this way. The shaman didn't tell them because she didn't want them to have such a slim hope. Generations passed. It had been almost 1,000 years, but they still couldn't go back. They didn't know when it started, but this was selectively forgotten. Only the higher-ups of the tribe knew. Zheng Luo knew. The shaman knew. Others didn't know the real reason. Xiao Xian's arrival was a ray of light, a ray of hope. In the past year, the shaman had sent a few batches of people to the seaside. Xiao Xian had been waiting for an opportunity to move the entire tribe. Unfortunately, they never found the opportunity. No one knew how long it would take for the opportunity to come again. Go back. How? As Xiao Xian pondered, he became absent-minded while digging for the fire crystals. The Mountain Wind Chief was puzzled. What was with the atmosphere? He suddenly felt stifled. I'll take a look around first. Xiao Xian passed the fire crystals to Zheng Luo and ran along the tunnel. As he ran, Xiao Xian identified his bearings and calculated the distance. He stopped at a spot and looked at the top of the tunnel. This should be close to Yinjiao's salt cave. It wasn't directly above, but diagonally above. He didn't start digging immediately. Xiao Xian walked along the tunnel until he reached the end. This was where the king beast had emerged from the ground. But the entrance was already frozen. A very thick layer of ice blocked the entire entrance. The closer he got to the entrance, the colder it got. Xiao Xian didn't walk over. He listened carefully. When he didn't hear the sound of the king beast outside, he turned back. The king beast had frozen the entrance. It probably wasn't going to come back anytime soon. He called Zheng Luo and the others over and told them his plan. He planned to start digging below Yinjiao's salt cave. If they were going to be trapped here for a few more days, would they have to come down from Fox's place every time? The Fox tribe was clearly being targeted by the Beast King. If they went there, they might provoke the Beast King. Besides, most of the Fox and Shun tribe members weren't here. If they came back, a fight would be inevitable. There was no need to waste time with the Fox and Shun tribes. The four of them discussed and decided to do it. It didn't matter where they dug. Xiao Xian quickly waved his sword, using it as a shield to block the shovel. He broke through the ice layer of the tunnel and dug out the rocks on the wall one by one. Zheng Luo and the other two worked harder too. They weren't sure what was going on outside, so they couldn't leave immediately. They might as well get more fire crystals. Even if they had to fight the king beast later, they would protect a portion of the tribesmen back. If they could bring the crystals back, they wouldn't have wasted their time in this weather. The fire crystals they dug out could last the tribe for a long time. They didn't dig a large area, not even a tenth of the size of Fox's, but with the four of them working together, they progressed quickly. In the beginning, the rocks were hard, but the higher they went, the easier it became. In Yinjiao's cave, the warriors guarding the fire crystal pit panicked when they heard the commotion. They hurried to look for Duo Kong. Duo Kong sent a portion of the people in the cave up first to prevent the ice from spreading. After that, he brought a few people carefully to the fire crystal pit. They planned to run as soon as they saw the ice. What else was underground other than the king beast? Screech! The sound from below grew clearer. It didn't sound like the king beast. There was no intimidating aura and no ice. Was it an enemy? Fox tribe or Shin tribe? Duo Kong grew cautious and inched closer, craning his neck to look into the pit. He signaled for the others to be ready. The other soldiers around him were also gripping their weapons, their facial muscles twitching nervously. They were frightened by the king beast. They didn't want to see anything strange jump out from below. They hoped it was a human, no matter if it was Fox, Shun, or any other tribe. The sounds came closer. The people around the pit were tense. It really didn't sound like a giant beast. There was movement below. Duo Kong raised his hand. Poof! Rumble! The soil and rocks were pushed aside. Duo Kong was about to wave his arm and shout, "Attack!" when four heads popped out from below, their faces covered in dirt. He focused his gaze. Yo! 3 chiefs and an elder jumped out of the cave. The four of them had worked so hard to dig their way up. When they popped their heads out, they saw a group of people surrounding the pit, all pointing their weapons at them. Chapter 471. Seeing that it was these 4 people who had appeared, Duo Kong was stunned. He rubbed his eyes in disbelief and looked again. Chief, why did you come out from below? Duo Kong laughed dryly and put away his axe. The others did not dare to fight the 3 chiefs and 1 elder, so they put away their axes just as quickly as Duo Kong. But they were still confused. Didn't the chief go outside? Why did he come out from below? Duo Kong found someone to throw a rope, and Xiao Xian and the others climbed out of the hole one by one. Zheng Luo explained the reason briefly, and then sat down on a rock not far away, panting. Although they were relatively strong, they had never stopped digging from the tunnel down here. They were also afraid that the king beast would come back if they were too slow. They were so tense that they finally relaxed. Duo Kang's eyes lit up. That means if we can't leave, we can jump down here every day to dig for fire crystals? That's right. Chief, you rest first. I'll continue digging. Duo Kong rubbed his hands. The king beast was less afraid now. The fire crystals were more attractive. Don't bring too many people. Be alert. Come back if you notice anything wrong. Don't be greedy, Zheng Luo reminded. Also, clean up the dirt in the tunnel. There was a lot of dirt in the tunnel because of their digging. If the king beast entered the tunnel again, they wondered if it would be angry at the dirt. They shuddered at the thought of the fox's salt cave. It was too tragic. Not a single person on the upper and lower floors could avoid it. Got it. Duo Kong called a few people over. They put on their equipment and slid down the rope. The other two tribes had the same idea. They would not miss this opportunity. They grabbed the rope and slid down too. Xiao Xian, when can we leave? Zheng Luo asked. I don't know. Wait. Xiao Xian took out a rope, planning to do another divination. He wanted to know about the king beast, but the divination failed. After so many times of divination, Xiao Xian had already gained experience. Generally speaking, it was very difficult for him to divine people or beasts that were far more powerful than him. Therefore, after failing once, Xiao Xian tried to divine the weather again. Although there was still no clear conclusion, the results of the divination told Xiao Xian that the weather here would get worse. We'll leave in 2 days, Xiao Xian said. 2 days later, Zheng Luo frowned. Why? It wasn't that he didn't trust Xiao Xian, he just wanted to know the reason. In 2 days, the snow should stop temporarily. When it starts again, it won't be like this. Xiao Xian told him the results of the divination. The knot did not tell him what would happen in the future, but it did hint that the best time to leave was in 2 days, when the snow would stop. The Taiha and Mountain Wind chiefs took note of Xiao Xian's words. They thought about it and made plans. In the past, the Mountain Wind people did not have a good impression of the Yinjiao tribe. They only thought that they were strong and rude. But now it seemed that the Yinjiao people were not bad, especially that Xiao Xian. Then let's prepare in advance. Tell the people in the cave that we'll leave in 2 days, the Taiha chief said. Since they had decided to leave in 2 days, the matter of digging for fire crystals was even more urgent. After a good rest, the 3 leaders continued to dig in the pit. The people in the salt cave also urged them to hurry up and dig out the salt mine. They only had 2 days, so they had to dig as much as they could. In the past, they had only dug out as much as was needed in the salt cave. They wouldn't dig out too much, as it would be useless if there was too much. They wouldn't sell all of it either. What they sold was only a small part of it. That was why they had only dug out 2 levels of the salt cave in the past few hundred years. Fortunately, they had only dug out 2 levels. If they had continued digging, there would be no more salt. If they had dug out fire crystals in advance and provoked the king beast in advance, the people guarding here would have been wiped out long ago. After a few days of idling, the warriors of the 3 tribes felt much better now that they had work to do. They did not have to think too much about it every day. Whether it was the salt from the top of the cave or the bottom of the cave, they brought all the salt with them. This might be their last time here. No one wanted to be arrogant in the territory of a king beast. If they had known, they would have left long ago. Logically speaking, this was Yinjiao's salt cave. The Taiha and Mountain Wind people should not be digging here. But their cave had not been cleared out yet, and time was tight. Plus, Zheng Luo felt that this would be their last time digging here. Since they were partners, they might as well dig in the same cave. There was a lot of salt left anyway. If they finished in 2 days, it would be just right. If they came back later, the Taiha and Mountain Wind people would help Yinjiao get another cave. Just like that, some people dug for salt while others dug for fire crystals. The division of labor was divided into different areas. There were people outside the cave observing and guarding. Once they noticed the king beast's movements, they would quickly retreat. The king beast appeared around noon on the 2nd day. It only wandered around for a while before leaving. It did not come to the salt cave. The people who went into the tunnel to dig for fire crystals met Fox's people as they dug. Both sides met in the tunnel and almost clashed swords. Especially Mountain Wind's people. They looked at each other with fire in their eyes. When enemies meet, their eyes were especially red. Just as they were about to fight, someone above warned, "The king beast has appeared." With a whoosh, both sides ran back to their respective caves. The Fox people ran towards the Fox cave, while the other side ran towards the Flaming Horn cave. After running back for a while, they realized that the king beast was only wandering around. They relaxed and continued digging. But this time, they did not meet the Fox people again. The Mountain Wind chief, Lanmu, told them to ignore the Fox people for now. Revenge must be taken, but the tribe's matters were more important. They did not have much time. "Chief, what do we do?" In the Fox cave, a fox warrior asked the silent Fox chief with a dark expression. They were hiding in the Shun tribe's salt cave. When they heard the king beast roar, they knew that things were not going well in their cave. While they were glad, they were also sad. They knew that the situation here was terrible. After the king beast left, they hid for a while before coming back. To their surprise, all they saw was a cave full of icemen. There was no sign of life at all. When they came to the fire crystal pit, they saw traces of people digging. There were also traces in the tunnel below the pit. They walked along the tunnel and heard the sound of digging. When they looked over, they saw people from the 3 tribes. Clearly, the fire crystals that they worked so hard to dig out were all stolen by the 3 tribes in Yinjiao. Why didn't the king beast roar at Yinjiao's cave? A fox warrior complained. But they knew that the fox and Shun tribesmen were the first to provoke the king beast, especially the miners. Not only did they touch the king beast, they even pried off its scales. Even though it was only a small piece, it was still an affront. Perhaps that was why the king beast went to the cave and roared, killing everyone in the cave. In terms of regret, the one who regretted it the most was the fox chief. They had quarreled with the Shun tribe at the Shun tribe's cave and almost broke off relations with them. The only reason the Shun chief held himself back was because they were not as smart as the fox people. If they wanted to leave this place safely, they had to rely on the fox people. What should they do? No one knew. Since we can't think of anything, why don't we pay attention to the mountain wind? The woman standing next to the fox leader thought for a moment and said, if we fight the king beast head on, we won't be able to win. Look at the people frozen to death in the cave. But what if we have bait? The fox chief's eyes flashed. You mean, we should let them attract the king beast's attention while we escape? That's right. That's a good idea. But I'm not satisfied with those fire crystals. No one was willing to give up those crystals. They were so close. Wouldn't it be a waste if they didn't dig? Hence, the fox and Shun tribesmen discussed again. They decided to dig for the crystals first, then find a chance to trick the Yinjiao people. Then they could escape. It was a good plan, but just as they were digging for fire crystals, the people who were watching the Flaming Horn Cave came to report that the people there had left the cave. Left? There were so many crystals down there. The king beast never left. Why did they leave? The snow has stopped. The wind has stopped too. Maybe they decided to use this chance to leave. The Shun chief hesitated. Should they leave too? But there were so many crystals down there, and they hadn't dug out much yet. What they dug out in one day was more than what they had dug for so long. They couldn't bear to leave. Then, let's dig for a few more days? The fox chief suggested, but his mind was racing. Even without the flaming horns as bait, there were still others. Once they dug up the fire crystals, all they had to do was push the others out. Hence, when the 3 Yinjiao tribes left, the fox and Shun tribesmen did not follow. Instead, they continued to dig. The people the fox invited over with salt knew about the existence of the crystals. Even if they were asked to leave now, they wouldn't be willing. Their minds were filled with the crystals. Looking at the people whose minds were filled with the crystals, the fox chief exchanged a look with the woman beside him. The corners of his mouth curled up. People who had lost their minds were the easiest to manipulate. They were the best bait. At this moment, the Yinjiao tribesmen, Taihe, and Mountain Wind walked out of the cave, heading towards the white ground. The snow on the ground, leveled by the king beast, was 6 to 7 meters thick. It was taller than the houses they lived in. And now, they were struggling to move forward in this snowy land. Will we meet a king beast? Asked Duo Kong. I don't think so, right? Xiao Xian wasn't sure either. Hopefully, they weren't that unlucky. Chapter 472. The snow had stopped, but the layer of snow that was taller than a house was a huge hindrance to the 3 teams. Anyone who walked under the snow would feel uncomfortable. In the end, the 3 chiefs decided to take the risk and walk where the king beast had crawled. The king beast had appeared nearby yesterday, and the snow had stopped this morning. The snow was not thick where the king beast had crawled. The snow on the ground was compacted, forming a long, U-shaped path. It was much easier to walk on this path. Other than the knee-high snow, there were no other obstacles. They just had to be wary of the king beast. After confirming the direction, if there were any traces of the king beast, they would follow the tracks. If not, they would have to walk under the snow. The Yinjiao people were fine. They were strong and could withstand the pressure. The others had it much harder. There are more traces of the king beast up ahead. Zheng Luo looked ahead, but it's not recent. The snow is knee-high. It's been here for a while. As long as there was snow, it meant that the king beast had not come here in a short time. This was good news. Hurry up, don't stop, Zheng Luo said to the team behind him. It would take at least 3 days to get out of this salt field. Too many things could happen in 3 days. In the past, they only needed to walk for 2 days and rest at night. Now, even if they rushed through the night, it would be difficult to get out in 2 days. They took the risk and chose to walk where the king beast had crawled. First, the snow was not thick. Second, there were no salt flowers. They did not have to worry about running into poisonous salt flowers. The mountain wind tribesmen could finally play their role. The snow here was too thick and too high, completely blocking their vision, so they couldn't see if there was any danger around them. However, the mountain wind tribesmen had their wings. Although they couldn't fly very high or fly continuously, it was enough for them to see the situation from above. It's safe. Keep going. Lan Mu, the chief of the mountain wind tribe, spoke with a lot more confidence. From the beginning until now, the mountain wind people rarely had the chance to show their existence. Before, the Yinjiao people always felt inferior to them. Now, they could finally hold their heads high. Hearing that there were no beast kings around, the team was relieved. Their footsteps became lighter. They didn't want to face a beast king, even if it was difficult to pass through the knee-deep snow. Xiao Xian's heart skipped a beat as he hurried along. He stopped in his tracks and listened carefully. What's wrong? Zheng Luo quickly stopped. Xiao Xian waited for a while. Finally, he heard 2 consecutive bangs, one high and one low. They seemed to be very far away, and the sound was almost inaudible. However, it also felt very close, as if it was ringing in his ears. Beast King. Didn't he say that he didn't see it around? They were walking on the tracks left by the king beast. The snow was knee-deep, so it wasn't new. There was no sign of it around. I heard that voice again, Xiao Xian said. These words were like a heavy boulder, instantly crushing the 3 leaders' relaxed mood to the point of suffocation. Beast! Beast King! Where is it? That's impossible. I flew up and took a look. I didn't see a Beast King. The chief of the mountain wind tribe said. Bang bang, bang bang. The sound came faster and faster, just like when the giant beast woke up in the salt cave. Xiao Xian looked to the side. There was a tall, white wall of snow. The others followed Xiao Xian's gaze. Crack, rumble, it sounded like ice cracking, with the sound of chunks rolling down. The ground beneath their feet was shaking. The tall wall of snow in front of them was shaking and crumbling. Whoosh! A giant white beast's head emerged from the ground, breaking through the snow. It shook off the snow on its head, revealing a face that looked like it was covered in ice. It was the king beast. It had burrowed underground. No wonder they couldn't see it from above. It was underground. At this time, should he run for his life or pretend to be dead? They didn't know the habits of this creature. They didn't know how to deal with it. What should they do? Everyone in the group, including the 3 chiefs, felt a sense of despair. When they were in the salt cave, they didn't have such a strong feeling. Even when the giant beast crawled over their heads, it wasn't as strong as when they were looking at it. Most of the giant beast's body was still underground. It raised its head and the front part of its body, looking at Xiao Xian and the group. Puff! The giant beast breathed out white mist from its 2 nostrils. The surrounding temperature dropped instantly. This was just the giant beast's breath. If it roared at the group, the consequences would be unimaginable. The giant beast's gaze swept from the front of the group to the back of the group like frost. Everyone was as stiff as ice. Their blood seemed to be frozen, and they even forgot to breathe. Turning their heads with difficulty, the team members looked at their leader, waiting for his decision. If the leader told them to run, they would run for their lives. If the leader told them to fight, they would also fight. Then they would let the people with the fire crystals and the salt mine leave. The 3 chiefs also had a difficult choice. One mistake, and they would suffer heavy casualties. This was the helplessness of the disparity in strength. Run? Wouldn't it backfire on him? After all, some ferocious beasts like to chase running living things. Maybe they would be ignored by standing still. Don't run. But what if it roars at us? Will we all freeze to death? At this time, the three chiefs unconsciously looked at Xiao Xian. It wasn't just the three chiefs. After the giant beast scanned the entire team, it looked at Xiao Xian and even approached him. Xiao Xian felt that his hands and feet were cold. This was the first time he was so close to a Beast King. Who knew if the Beast King would get angry and freeze them all to death? When the giant beast had approached, the people around stepped back except for Xiao Xian. He felt that retreating was useless. Besides, the giant beast's target seemed to be him. The giant beast lowered its head and approached Xiao Xian. It didn't stop until it was less than 10 meters away. The difference in size made Xiao Xian feel that he couldn't even block the giant beast's nostrils. In the frosty eyes, Xiao Xian could see the snowflake-like lines in the iris of the giant beast. Its sword-like pupils contracted very slightly, as if its owner was thinking, deciding something. Its emotions were not strong. Puffed. The giant beast exhaled again. White mist hit him in the face. Xiao Xian felt a prickling pain on his face. A layer of frost had formed on his skin. In just one breath, Xiao Xian felt like he had been thrown into a freezer. Xiao Xian. Zheng Luo was about to rush over in shock when he saw the totemic patterns on Xiao Xian's body. Xiao Xian urged the totemic power in his body, trying his best to resist the oncoming frost. The clash of ice and fire was very clear on Xiao Xian's body. Xiao Xian's body was covered in white frost. The red flames split it apart and spread to the totemic patterns on his body, driving the frost away. The invading frost was being forced out by the totemic power in his body. Xiao Xian could only hope that the giant beast would not roar at them. The roar was not an attack on the same level. He could block the beast's breath, but he could not block its roar. If it was that easy to block, everyone in the fox cave would not have been frozen in place. This was the difference in power. He tried to calm his aura so as not to provoke the beast. Xiao Xian stared into the giant beast's eyes. Although its eyes were cold and emotionless, they reflected some emotions. Xiao Xian could react according to the changes in its eyes. Very soon, the giant beast's vertical pupils dilated and contracted slightly. The beast retracted its head and raised its upper body slightly, but its eyes were still fixed on Xiao Xian. Following the giant beast's movements, its head was covered with a few special long diamond-shaped scales. The front end was slightly raised, and icicles were quickly formed, making it look like it was wearing a scarf made of icicles. This was actually a signal to attack. Run! Xiao Xian roared. The surrounding temperature dropped rapidly. The knee-high snow layer was like a swamp, trapping everyone there and severely restricting their movements. Even if they wanted to run for their lives, the reality was that they didn't have the time to escape the attack range. Slow, too slow. They were not even a tenth of their usual speed in the mountains. How could they escape? As Zheng Luo ran, he caught a glimpse of Xiao Xian still standing there. He wanted to pull Xiao Xian away, but before he could, the giant beast opened its mouth. A gust of wind stronger than a storm rushed towards Xiao Xian, freezing everything in its path. It was over. That was what Zheng Luo had thought. In that moment, Zheng Luo was filled with regret. If he had been one step earlier, would he have been able to drag Xiao Xian away? No one could stop the beast's roar. Scenes from the fox's cave flashed through Zheng Luo's mind. The people frozen there, the pieces of frozen flesh. Boom! The loud sound was like an explosion. It sent Zheng Luo flying. Those who didn't run far were also sent flying. The tall layers of snow on both sides were lifted from the ground and thrown far away. They split into smaller pieces in the air and scattered into the surroundings. On the white, snowy ground, the giant ice beast stood there like the absolute king of this frozen land, looking down at the tiny people on the ground. In front of it, a burst of flames shot up. The rolling flames dispersed due to the impact of the cold air, but they quickly gathered back and converged, gradually forming a blurry human figure. Between the boundless heaven and earth, In this frozen world covered in white snow, the only color of fire stood opposite the white giant beast. Chapter 473. The once quiet land of ice and snow suddenly became violent. The collision of the two forces sent shock waves through the air, and the frozen ground under their feet seemed to wail. Xiao Xian held the bone ornament in one hand, while the other hand was clenched tightly. There was a fire crystal in his palm. With his current strength, even if he was a senior totemic warrior, one of the strongest in the tribe, he was nothing in front of the king beast. He would be easily killed in one blow. No one wanted to meet a king beast here, but that didn't mean they could run away. If they couldn't, they could only brace themselves and face it head-on. The only thing Xiao Xian could use was his ancestors' power. This was the only way to save his life. It was just a possibility. If it didn't work, not just Xiao Xian, even the 3 troops here, almost 3,000 warriors, less than 1% of them would survive. Totemic tattoos covered Xiao Xian's rapidly expanding muscles like lava. Even the tips of his fingers were covered in totemic tattoos. Because of the totemic tattoos, Xiao Xian's face was no longer recognizable. Only his eyes were staring diagonally upwards. The frosty airflow rushed over, and the air seemed to be pierced by a sharp spear, making a sharp sound, one after another. The white blast from the beast's mouth was mixed with frost and endless coldness. It enveloped Xiao Xian completely. If it wasn't for the bone ornament's flame, Xiao Xian would have been frozen and exploded. Just like those people at the entrance of the Fox Salt Cave, their organs and blood were frozen. Not a drop of blood flowed out, and they couldn't even feel pain. Under such circumstances, Xiao Xian could only barely see a gigantic shadow through the white frost. The sharp sound of the cold air surging in his ears was like thousands of knives continuously sweeping across, mercilessly wiping out everything it touched. It did not give him a chance to breathe. The totemic power in his body, as well as the power of inheritance, blue and red energy, seemed to be screaming and roaring. The blue flood rushed out of the totemic flames, out of the outer shell of the totemic flames, and gathered at the bone ornament on his chest. It flowed rapidly, forming a whirlpool in his chest. It kept sucking in a blue flood, and then passed it on to the 4 bone ornaments outside. The red totemic power flowed through his veins, blood, bones, and muscles, and into every part of his body. It kept the cold from seeping in, and supported his body so that he could continue to borrow the power of the bone ornament. Outside, the 2 sides were facing each other. Inside his body, blood was also roaring. The 2 sides were fighting at the same time. The white frosty air released by the beast was mainly targeted at Xiao Xian. It did not care about anyone else, so Xiao Xian took the brunt of the attack. The blast of air carried a little bit of residual energy as it spread outwards, blowing everything around it away. The ground beneath his feet was trembling, as if it could not withstand such power. Under the frost storm, although the flame giant would occasionally disperse, it would quickly gather again and continue to resist the beast's attack. The flying frosty air scraped the ground around Xiao Xian, making ear-piercing screeches. Sweat kept dripping down, soaking Xiao Xian's animal skin clothes. Xiao Xian did not know how long he could last, but being able to hold on was already a blessing in disguise. It just happened too suddenly, and he did not know if the others could escape in time. If they were affected, they would not be in a good state either. At this time, Xiao Xian could not care about the others. What he needed to do was to block the beast's attack as much as possible. If he could not hold on, then he could only die here. Whoosh! The rapidly flowing waves of air suddenly stopped, and the white cold current that enveloped the entire area instantly disappeared. The flames that were about to disperse from the impact gathered together, making the outline of the flame giant even clearer. The beast's open mouth was slightly closed, and its snow-striped eyes were filled with doubt. Its long and narrow pupils widened slightly, moving slowly. It probably did not expect that the person in front of it could block its attack. The thick layer of snow on the ground had long disappeared, and there was no one else nearby. Xiao Xian was anxious, but he could not afford to lose his composure at this critical moment. He calmed himself down and stared at the beast. Was it going to launch another ice attack? Or was it going to use brute force with a sweep of its tail? If that was the case, Xiao Xian would not be able to block it. Even though he was much more familiar with controlling the bone ornaments, his agility was greatly affected after using them so intensely. There was no way he could dodge the Beast King's attack. The only thing that made Xiao Xian feel a little relieved was that the Beast King did not show any real killing intent. It was more like a test and a warning. Compared to the roar in the Fox Cave, this Beast King was a little calmer. Puffed. The giant white beast closed its mouth and exhaled a cloud of white mist from its two large nostrils. It raised its head and leaned back slightly. A part of its body was pulled out from the ground, making it look even taller. The flames around Xiao Xian slowly subsided, and the flame giant disappeared. Only a few flames were still flickering on the surface of its body. This was Xiao Xian trying to conserve his energy. The sudden high-intensity confrontation had used up a lot of his energy. He could not continue like that. He had to slow down and wait for the Beast King's reaction. The giant beast stared at Xiao Xian, its tail forcibly breaking through the ice and lifting up. Xiao Xian's heart skipped a beat. Was the beast really going to use force? Bang! The beast slammed its tail on the ground, causing the ground to shake violently. The sound traveled across the white ice field and into the distance. In the fox's cave, the fox leader had come out to listen carefully after receiving his subordinate's report. He had heard the roar of a giant beast. Although it was far away and those with poor hearing might not have heard it, it was undoubtedly the roar of a giant beast. He was overjoyed. That was the direction the 3 tribes from Yinjiao had gone. They must have encountered the beast. Serves him right. It would be best if they were all eaten by the beast. Now that he heard the roar, the fox chief was even happier. He returned to the cave. Take over Yinjiao's cave. They won't be able to come back. Even if they do, chase them out. They must have suffered heavy casualties. On the other side, Xiao Xian watched as the beast slammed its tail on the ground again and again. Then it roared again, but this time, it was not as close as before. After blocking the second attack, Xiao Xian was exhausted. A third attack of the same level would be too much for him. However, what did this giant beast's actions seem to be trying to express? The murderous intent in its eyes was not strong, but more of a threat. Chase them out? Warn them? Don't worry, we'll leave immediately. After a pause, Xiao Xian added, we won't come back again. Xiao Xian did not know if the white beast could understand him. But after he spoke, the beast stopped slamming its tail on the ground. Screech! There was a soft sound not far away. It was not within the range of the blast. Although a layer of snow had been blown away, there was still a layer of snow about half a meter high on the ground. Following the sound, a red crystal pillar broke through the snow. There were many branches around it, like coral. The salt flower had bloomed. He didn't know if it was because of the weather or because of the snow, but the salt flowers were still expanding. They didn't look like flowers that bloomed on the ground, but more like trees that grew on the salt ground. After the salt flower broke through the snow, the beast that had been staring at Xiao Xian ignored him. It crawled towards the flower, lowered its head, and bit down on the flower that had stopped growing. It pulled out of the ground and swallowed it. There was the sound of glass shattering or ice breaking. Crunch, 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 crunch. The crunching sounds were very clear. Some bits fell on the snow. After the beast swallowed the salt flower, it swallowed all the bits of snow that had splashed onto it. Xiao Xian watched all this with wide eyes. This giant beast was actually a vegetarian. No, to be exact, it ate salt. The salt flower that others saw as poisonous was an incomparably delicious food to it. It was no wonder that the beast was not angry about the salt mine in the salt cave. To it, the salt in the salt mine was not very attractive. From the moment it woke up, Xiao Xian had not seen it eat the salt in the salt mine. But on this salt ground, the salt flower that people feared had become a delicious meal. As for the rest, it probably did not care and completely ignored them. Just like the other creatures that lived in the king's stoneworm's wormhole, as long as they did not touch the king's interests, they were ignored. The king allowed them to live lowly. After eating the salt flour, leaving not even a scrap, the beast turned around and left. From time to time, it lowered its head and arched its head in the thick snow, as if it was sniffing. Before leaving, the beast roared at Xiao Xian again and slammed its tail a few times. Xiao Xian used the last of his strength to block the third wave of frost attack. Fortunately, the two sides were farther away this time, so it was not as strong as the previous two times. Otherwise, Xiao Xian would not have been able to block it. "We're leaving now," Xiao Xian shouted. After the beast left, Xiao Xian moved his stiff body. His muscles seemed to have hardened and his bones seemed to have rusted. Every time he moved, he could hear a creaking sound. It was extremely difficult to move. He loosened his clenched fist, and the remaining white powder fell from his palm. The fire crystal in his hand had been absorbed. His legs were weak. He wanted to move his feet, but his body swayed uncontrollably. He lost his balance and fell to the ground. "Leader, where are you?" Xiao Xian shouted. "Who else is there?" He did not hear a reply. After a while, when Xiao Xian struggled to get up, he heard a muffled voice. It was Duo Kong. When he got up from the snow, Duo Kong was still in a daze. He did not brush off the snow on his body. Instead, he stared blankly at Xiao Xian. "Xiao Xian," Duo Kong seemed to be in disbelief. "It's me," Xiao Xian, who was still sitting on the cold ground, answered. "You're still alive?" "Yes, I'm still alive." "Where's the king beast?" "It's gone." "It's gone? That's good, that's good." Duo Kong tripped on the uneven ground. He lay on the ground and breathed heavily. He felt the joy and confusion of surviving a disaster. He did not continue to ask Xiao Xian what happened. He got up and wanted to find the others. Chapter 474. The snow around Xiao Xian was blown away, especially the spot where Xiao Xian was sitting. It was a salt field. Not a single bit of snow was left. There were marks of varying depths on the ground, radiating outwards. As for the others, many of them were knocked unconscious like Duo Kong. Some hid in the snow, waiting for the danger to pass before coming out. At that time, Xiao Xian's reminder was timely. Although most of them were sent flying and suffered some injuries, not many were seriously injured. Duo Kong and the others who woke up and walked out of the snow field in the distance. They dragged the others out one by one. If they stayed like this for too long, the unconscious ones would freeze to death. Zheng Luo was the one who was most seriously injured when he went to pull Xiao Xian away. But he was stronger, and Xiao Xian had taken the brunt of the attack. Although he was knocked unconscious and had to be carried by others, it was good that he was still alive. The bodies of the unconscious and those who had died in battle or for other reasons were found one by one. Those who could not be found were found with Xiao Xian's help. Although the snow was thick, Xiao Xian's special vision allowed him to see things within a certain range. This was much more convenient. The severely injured and unconscious were carried by the lightly injured and continued on their way. Xiao Xian told them that the king beast only wanted to chase them away. If it really wanted to kill them, it would have done so already. Although Xiao Xian described the situation simply, the people from Taihe and Mountain Wind did not dare to underestimate this young Yinjiao elder. They clearly felt the power that sent them flying. It was not an ordinary power. Yinjiao was stronger than they thought. "Right, Xiao Xian, you said that the king beast ate salt flowers. I remembered something. Do you think that the king beast is the salt beast that the Qilu people were talking about?" asked Zheng Luo, who was being carried by Duo Kong. "Salt beast?" The others thought about it. They could not remember the totem of the Qilu people. It had been a long time since they had seen the Qilu people who were good at making salt. Ever since the salt lake of the Qilu people had been occupied and absorbed into the city, they had almost lost all traces of the Qilu people in the forest. "I remember that the totem of the Qilu people was the kind with thorns, not snakes," said a warrior from the Mountain Wind tribe who recalled the past. "That's not thorns. That's ice. Do you remember what the king beast looked like before it was sent flying?" reminded Zheng Luo. "Now that I think about it, it does look like it. Because the king beast looked like a snake at first glance, they did not associate it with the salt beast on the totem of the Qilu tribe, which had a long history of salt culture. Didn't the salt beast totem of the Chilu tribe first appear in their salt lake? Later on, the Chilu people learned of the existence of salt and lived around the salt lake. Now that there's not much salt left in the lake, the nobles lost interest and moved on to the newly discovered salt springs, said the Taiha chief. But the salt beast never appeared in the Chilu salt lake again. Instead, we found high-quality salt in the salt mines. Why do you think the first person to discover the salt mines walked into the deadly salt fields? He's not from the Chilu tribe. He wouldn't have the ability to identify salt. Was there really nothing to attract him? Or did he want to commit suicide? Zheng Luo did not believe it. No matter what the truth was, it had been a few hundred years. No one knew the truth. They did not dare to go back and ask the king beast. Did he want to die? Anyway, we can't go to the salt mines anymore, sighed the mountain wind chief. If I knew there was a king beast, I wouldn't have gone. The leader of the Taiha tribe still had lingering fears after escaping death. Anyway, they wouldn't come back again. It wasn't like they couldn't survive. Anyway, it's good to be alive. Yeah, it's good to be alive. It was already a blessing that so many of them survived. Salt and fire crystals were secondary. The only thing the tribe wanted was to survive. I almost forgot. Are the Fox and Shun people still at the salt mines? Asked Duo Kong. The king beast had already warned them once. If it found anyone else, would it go berserk? Even if it roared a few times like this, there would not be another Xiao Xian to protect them. When we go back, keep an eye on the two tribes. If they come back, wait for the weather to improve before we fight, said the mountain wind chief. Speaking of the weather, the joy of surviving the disaster was once again diluted. They wondered how the tribe was doing in the weather. The extreme weather was one in 1,000 years. No one could truly relax. There were traces of the king beast on the salt ground. They did not have to walk in the snow, but most of the time, they still had to walk through thick layers of snow. Still, they felt better on the way back. The moment they walked out of the salt flats, everyone roared to the sky. They had survived the king beast and were about to leave this place where they had lived for hundreds of years. They would leave for good. Perhaps they would never set foot on the salt flats again. The people guarding the mines missed this place. Guarding the mines was passed down from generation to generation. They knew more than others. Wacha had taken over the position from his father. He walked the path his ancestors walked and did what they did. But when they thought of the king beast, they could only suppress their nostalgia. Their roars echoed across the snowy plains, causing the snow on the trees to fall. What used to be a forest was now covered in a thick layer of snow. However, the snow here was not as thick as the salt flats. The average thickness of the salt flats was about 10 meters. Outside the salt flats, the snow only reached a person's shoulders. Luckily, their heads could still be seen. If they stepped into a hole, they would be completely buried. We've already passed the salt flats. What's there to be afraid of here? Zheng Luo had Duo Kong put him down. Then he ordered the soldiers to cut down trees to make a wooden palanquin. It was easier to carry him. Those who could not walk would be more comfortable on the palanquin. The Yinjiao people were strong. It was easy for 4 people to carry 10 people. After distributing the injured, Zheng Luo was placed on a simple palanquin. He looked at the vast expanse of white in silence. The forest looked like it was covered with a thick layer of cotton. However, there was much less snow in the forest. This was the benefit of having large and dense trees. It was just that they had to guard against other fierce beasts that were active in the forest. Some beasts were hibernating. Others came out to find food when they were hungry. It was not just the humans. The animals were not used to the change in weather either. On their way back, they saw many beast corpses buried in the snow. There were animals eating around the corpses. Crunching sounds could be heard. The meat was frozen. When they were looking for a place to cook porridge, some brave animals wanted to come over. It was warmer here, but there were too many people, so they did not come over. However, there were a few small animals that looked like squirrels that jumped to the fire. They did not get too close, but they could borrow the heat from the fire. People in the tribe usually did not eat these small animals. They looked down on them. They would only eat them when there was nothing to eat. Therefore, these little creatures were very lucky to be alive and able to borrow the fire from the side. The soldiers who were not seriously injured hunted a few wild animals and two fearsome beasts that came out to find food. They roasted the meat and shared it with everyone. After being frozen for so many days, they could still savor the taste of hot food for a long time. Xiao Xian, when will the weather change again? Asked Zheng Luo. Tomorrow morning. This was the result of Xiao Xian's divination. But he could not tell what it would become. We won't rest tonight. Let's continue on our way. Zheng Luo decided. The other two chiefs had no objections. They only knew that it was better to follow the Yinjiao people than to decide on their own. It was not easy to travel at night. After all, they could not remember every detail of every place. There were many dangerous places in the forest, and they had to cross mountains. One mistake, and they could lose their lives. Xiao Xian had recovered a lot. Even the glowing crystals were not as useful as he was now. He led the way. Beside him was Wacha and his wife. They were most familiar with this place and had been here many times. Xiao Xian would ask them every now and then to confirm the direction before continuing on. The next morning, the first glimmer of light came. It started snowing again. The wind was strong, and those who could not stand still would be blown away. Good thing we've already crossed the most dangerous mountain. Watch aside. After leading the way for the whole night, Xiao Xian could take a breather now that someone else was leading the way. The sky was gloomy, even darker than when they were in the salt mines. Thick clouds made the day seem like dusk, gloomy and dark. After 2 days, they finally reached a familiar area. It was not far from the tribe. The mountain wind people had parted ways with them the day before. Thank you for this. If you need help, send someone to let us know. The Taiha chief said when they parted ways with the Yinjiao team. This time, if it weren't for the flaming horns, they might not even be able to return 10 out of the 1,000 people they brought out. Zheng Luo waved his hand and did not speak. He was still being carried. There's a path in front. The soldier leading the way shouted. The so-called path was a path cut through the thick snow. They did not need to move anymore. The tribe made this. And food. Wacha untied the animal skin bag, tied to a wooden pole. The dried meat inside was cold and hard, but should have been made in the past 2 days. It was good to be back. That was what every soldier thought. Before long, they saw people moving around. They were the tribe's patrolling soldiers. Everyone wore thick animal skins, their heads covered so only their eyes could be seen. They shouted happily when they saw the people who had returned. There will be people guarding here every day to sweep the snow away, the patrolling soldiers said. After counting the number of people in the team, the patrol soldiers who came to help felt a little relieved. This was much better than they had imagined. They were all mentally prepared to witness a tragic situation, but they didn't expect that so many people would be able to come back safely. Chief, how's the salt mine? A patrolling soldier asked. We'll talk when we get back. The patrolling soldiers did not ask any more questions. In the 2-meter-high snow, there was a curved path that led to the river in front of the tribe. The river was already frozen, so there was no need for a bridge. They could walk on the thick ice without any problems. Many people in the tribe had already heard the news and came to receive them. Some even handed them hot meat soup. When they returned to the tribe and thought about what they had experienced, the soldiers felt like they were in a nightmare. Luckily, they were awake now. Elder Xiao Xian. Someone squeezed through the crowd towards Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian blocked the flying snow and looked. It was the one who took care of the duck's shed. What, did the fat duck cause trouble? Xiao Xian asked. No, it hatched. The duck's egg hatched. Chapter 475. The eggs hatched. It had been a long time since the fat duck snatched the eggs. Compared to the eggs in the other nests, these eggs hatched much later. They were from the same nest, but the fat duck snatched the eggs and took a long time to hatch. If this was a coincidence, then there were too many coincidences. But if the fat duck was not efficient at hatching the eggs, that was not the case either. Even if it was an amateur, the eggs would not have hatched so differently. I'll go take a look. Xiao Xian passed the things he was carrying to Zheng Luo and the rest. He pushed through the crowd and followed the person in charge of the duck shed. It's been snowing too much recently. We've been sweeping the snow at least 3 times a day. When it doesn't stop, we'll even sweep at night." The person leading the way sounded worried. Many ducks have frozen to death this year. The ducks that did not want to go near the tribe had indeed frozen to death. Even the older ducklings were not spared. Many ducks brought their ducklings into the duck shed to seek shelter. Xiao Xian listened to the person in front of him talk about the recent happenings while observing the duck shed. The other duck sheds around him were quiet. Only the occasional duck call could be heard, but it did not sound energetic. When they arrived at the duck shed where the fat duck lived, the person leading the way did not enter. He pointed inside and stood at the door. He could not enter at all. If he pushed the door open, he would be attacked by the fat duck inside. He could only stand at the door and listen. Indeed, there was a young voice coming from inside. Xiao Xian pushed the door open and a murderous aura rushed towards him. To prevent the cold wind from blowing in, Xiao Xian quickly closed the door behind him. He took out a glowing crystal and placed it beside him for light. Seeing that it was Xiao Xian, the fat duck froze. It maintained its attacking posture, but did not move. Its eyes darted around as if it did not expect Xiao Xian to come. It was still very wary of Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian looked towards the duck nest. A few green balls of feathers were huddled there. They looked up at the light source, but could not see Xiao Xian clearly. They only felt a foreign aura and panicked. But when they sensed the fat duck beside them, they quickly calmed down. Xiao Xian also noticed a small detail. When a duck stood up from its nest, its feet hooked onto a piece of hay. A piece of hay was cut in half. It was the same foot as a fat duck's, but with a sharp hook. Beside the fat duck were some eggs that had not hatched. They were still in the process of hatching. After all, these eggs were hatched at different times and hatched at different times. Xiao Xian counted. There were about 8 green balls of feathers. When he left the tribe for the salt mines, he counted 31 eggs. This meant that there were still 23 eggs that had not hatched. He wondered if all of them would hatch successfully. Thinking about it, Xiao Xian felt that it was strange. None of the ducklings he saw before looked like this fat duck. Xiao Xian wondered if the fat duck's bloodline was too weak. Was that why the other ducklings did not look like it? Or were they cuckolded? But now it seemed that the fat duck had planned this all along. It knew how to pick the eggs from the nest, and the ones it picked out all looked like it. No wonder it did not care about the ducklings outside. Perhaps to it, only the ducklings here that looked like it were its own. It did not care about the others. Look at how tightly it protected these ducklings. Compared to the ones before, it was like heaven and earth. In the natural world, anything that was not its own would be killed, just like a pride of lions. And now, this fat duck was using a similar strategy and attitude. Only those it picked out would be treated well. Everything else was meaningless. Just as he was about to leave, Xiao Xian saw some strange marks on the ground. He took a closer look and realized that they were fish scales. Using his special vision, Xiao Xian scanned the house. In the corner behind the duck nest, there was a thin layer of hay. There were some small fish and fruits under it. This duck was well prepared. After looking around, Xiao Xian came out of the duck shed. "How is it? How many did you hatch?" The person in charge of the duck shed asked curiously. 8 hatched. The rest are still hatching." "What do the ducklings look like?" "Just like the fat duck." The person in charge of the duck shed was even more curious. Unfortunately, he did not dare to go in. "Don't worry. When the snow stops and winter is over, they will naturally come out," said Xiao Xian. After leaving the duck shed, Xiao Xian was called to Zheng Luo's place on the mountain. He had a hot meal and went back to sleep. During this time, no one in the team had a good rest. Xiao Xian only slept for a day. The others slept for 2 days and 2 nights without waking up. On the 3rd day back at the tribe, although it was snowing heavily, the tribe still held a farewell ceremony. They built a barrier around the fire pit and cremated the warriors who had sacrificed themselves. Survival meant endless wars and endless life and death. The people in the tribe had long been used to such farewells. Although their hearts were heavy, it was much better than what they had expected. After the ceremony, Xiao Xian was called for a meeting. This was the first time everyone had gathered for a meeting after returning from the salt flats. After treatment and rest, Zheng Luo's injuries were better and he could walk now. They had already told the shamanists and the higher-ups about what happened to the salt mines. There were happy and sad moments. No one objected to losing the salt mines. Even if they did not see the king beast, they knew that with their current strength, they could not fight it. Giving up on the king beast and avoiding conflict was the best choice. Fortunately, they brought back a lot of salt. Most importantly, they brought back fire crystals. This made everyone very excited. With these fire crystals, the tribe's warriors could strengthen and improve their strength, especially those who were at a bottleneck. The fire crystals could solve their problems. The Taiha tribe sent over some herbs. Some were effective for frostbite, some for disease prevention. After all, it was the first time they had encountered such weather. The warriors were more or less not used to it, especially the children, who fell sick easily. The shamanists explained the various arrangements for this snow disaster. It was impossible to leave this place. In this kind of weather, it was impossible to leave. Moreover, they didn't know if other places would be better than here. They could only stay in the tribe and resist the weather. The warriors chopped some firewood and stored it in the house to keep warm. Fortunately, they had a lot of animal hides, so they did not have to worry about shelter. According to the Taiha people, some of the smaller tribes in the forest had already frozen to death. They did not know the details. In this weather, it was impossible to investigate. After everything was settled, the higher-ups discussed fox and shun. When winter was over and the snow stopped, they would investigate and see how the people in the salt mines were doing. Mountain Wind wanted to start a war against Fox. They had tried to persuade Zheng Luo and Taiha to join, but Zheng Luo did not agree immediately. It wasn't just the Flaming Horns. Taiha and Mountain Wind were also thinking about the Fox and Shun tribes who were still at the mines. What was the situation like now? At this moment, a massacre was taking place on the salt flats and snowy plains. The Beast King didn't care if those people were on the same side. It would do whatever it wanted. To it, it was the only one in this white land. It was its territory. All other creatures had to step aside. It had only intended to do what it had done when it encountered the group of people before. It would roar twice, blow a few breaths, and knock its tail as a warning. However, it did not expect that this group of little things would dare to resist and even use force against it. This was a challenge to the king beast. It was enraged. People with animal skin bags full of salt and fire crystals were running for their lives in the thick layer of snow on the salt ground. Those who couldn't escape had already been frozen in ice or had been sent flying. No one knew where they fell, but no one cared about them. The Fox and Shun people were all running for their lives. They thought they would return with their bags full of loot after not seeing the king beast. They did not expect to meet it again. The people who had been used as bait by the Fox Chief had all been frozen into ice, cracked by the cold wind, and scattered among the snow. Without the bait, the people from the two tribes who had not managed to escape were dwindling rapidly. The leader of the Fox took his lover and sprinted through the snow. He did not have the time to look at the others. Those who could keep up with him, those who could not, could only become a part of the snow. The Fox people had split into 3 teams, escaping in 3 different directions. He did not know how the other 2 teams were doing. There were more than 1,200 people from the Fox tribe, but now there were only about 300 left. They had not made it out of the salt flats, and there were still the Shun people to share the firepower. Thinking about the losses today, the Fox Chief's heart bled. Not just the salt and fire crystals, they had lost a lot of people. It was enough to force him to step down. He did not even dare to imagine what would happen when he returned. "It's all the Yin Jiao's fault," scolded the woman in the Fox Chief's arms. Yes, it was all the Yin Jiao's fault. If it weren't for the Flaming Horns, their plan would have been executed on time. Everything would have gone smoothly. The salt caves would have been destroyed, and the teams from the other 3 tribes would have suffered from the cold. Then, they would have gone to the Shun salt caves and fought with the outsiders. The Fox tribe would have just been waiting to pick up the leftovers. The king beast was an accident. However, they had run so far, but did not see any Yin Jiao or Taiha or Mountain Wind corpses. Did they all escape? He even purposely chose the path Yin Jiao took, but all he saw was a thin layer of snow. Other than that, there were no other traces. No, They must have all been eaten. They must have. Although he was more inclined to believe that the three tribes had all left, the fox chief did not want to admit it. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. His eyes were bloodshot. If they could escape this time, he would not let the Yinjiao people go. He would not let them go. Chapter 476. The blizzard continued, even more ferocious than before. Fortunately, compared to the salt flats, the tribe was much calmer. The current blizzard was only a little more ferocious than the previous one. But for the warriors who had experienced the blizzard in the salt flats, it was much easier. Looking at the snow outside, they were very calm. Xiao Xian rested for a few days. After his body had fully recovered, he walked out of the house, braving the cold wind and snow, to the place where the shaman had arranged for him to train. Because there were not many people living here, and the soil was not suitable for farming, most of the time it was empty and became a playground for the children. Even if Xiao Xian had been training before, he would spare a few days for the younger generation of the tribe to practice their throwing and chopping. But now it was snowing, and even the senior totem warriors were unwilling to come out, not to mention the younger generation who were not strong enough. In such a large area, there was only Xiao Xian. Because no one came here, in order to save manpower, the snow was not cleared. Therefore, the snow here was much thicker than in the densely populated areas. It was already taller than Xiao Xian's height. Now the snow was still falling, and the snow was still piling up. Xiao Xian followed the path cleared by the tribal warriors to the end of the road. Looking at the white snow wall in front of him, he took a deep breath. The totem power in his body was running, but it was not as crazy as before. There were no opponents or enemies here, so he did not need to deal with it in such an intense way. He also did not need to bear the totem power and the power of inheritance. There was no hurry. He could take it slow. The totem power was running all over his body, and the power of inheritance was separated from the totem flame and gathered in the totem bone ornament on his chest. Just like the previous times when he borrowed the power of the ancestors, the difference was that this time it was more gentle. The previous practice was just to familiarize himself, but now it was to control it more precisely. There was no need to be intense. He just needed to do every detail according to his will and not lose control. Whoosh! The flame came out of the bone ornament, gradually expanding until it wrapped Xiao Xian's whole body. The totemic power in his body drove the airflow that overflowed from his pores. It intertwined with the whistling of the wind outside, making a whining sound. As the wind became more intense, the sound became louder. The thin layer of snow that had accumulated on the ground beneath his feet seemed to have been swept away, leaving only a round, earth-colored ground. Half an arm's length away from Xiao Xian, there was a 3-meter-high layer of snow in front of him. However, the thick layer of snow was sinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. The snow wall closest to Xiao Xian seemed to be pushed away from Xiao Xian by an invisible hand. In the midst of the white snow, Xiao Xian, who was wrapped in a layer of red flames, slowly lifted a foot and took a step forward. Boom! His foot landed on the ground like the hooves of a giant beast in the forest. There was a rumbling sound, and the ground shook. The force of this stomp on the ground created air currents and shock waves, causing the originally dented snow wall in front of him to quickly expand, the arc increasing in size. Chunks of white snow were lifted from the large snow wall, flying into the distance. A small piece of gravel flew out from the crack in the ground under his feet and shot into the snow wall like a bullet. The first step slowed down for a second step. The second step was the same as the first. There was a loud rumble when he stepped on the ground. The layer of snow continued to be pushed back by the force of his step. Chunks of snow flew into the air. A bigger gap appeared on the snow wall as it moved further away from him. The effect of these two steps couldn't compare to the time he sent the Linlu chief flying with one palm in the royal city. It couldn't compare to the force he used against the king beast either. It couldn't even compare to the 2 steps he used at Gongjia Mountain. Although the sound was loud, it was nothing compared to the previous few times. The force was still strong, but much gentler. It wasn't as intense as before. It was much gentler. This was the result of Xiao Xian's control. He wanted to control them more precisely and master them more skillfully. Instead of wasting them in useless places, he wanted to focus them as much as possible and use them on the target he had set. Not enough. This control wasn't enough. The third step, the fourth step, step by step, he took it slowly. The rumbling sound gradually quieted, the ground shaking weaker with each step. The gravel on the ground was no longer sent flying, and the snow on the wall no longer flew. Everything was progressing in a more peaceful direction. Compared to the peaceful movements outside, Xiao Xian's power was circulating more intensely. The totemic power in his body circulated again and again so that his body could sustain the bone ornament's power. His skin changed with the changes. Totemic patterns that were red like molten lava flowed with flames, almost covering Xiao Xian's entire body. Within the totemic flames, blue flames surged like a flood, gathering at his chest. At this moment, Xiao Xian couldn't hear anything from the outside world. There was only the sound of his blood and the thumping of his heart. The air around his body flowed like boiling steam. The humming sound became more rapid. However, it didn't take long for the rapid humming sound to fade. His body was so stiff that he couldn't move when he used the bone ornaments. Now, he could take more than one step. His stiff movements became smoother and more natural. His heavy footsteps also became lighter. In the vast expanse of white snow, Xiao Xian was like a red fish, swimming leisurely in the white sea of snow. Zheng Luo looked at Xiao Xian as if he was a monster. No one in the tribe could feel the power of the bone ornaments more deeply than him. When Xiao Xian used the bone ornaments against the king beast, Zheng Luo was the closest. He couldn't dodge in time and was sent flying. He couldn't even walk when he left the salt fields. He had to be carried back by Duo Kong. After recuperating for so long, he could only move his legs a few times. Even running was difficult. But looking at Xiao Xian, he had gone from unleashing his power with every kick and punch to now being restrained and calm. The change was so fast that he could not believe it. How could he release such power so freely? If it was so easy, there wouldn't be only one Xiao Xian in thousands of years. The shamaness wore a thick fur coat, braving the freezing wind and snow. Her eyes were filled with relief. She turned to Zheng Luo. Has everything been arranged? Yes, they left this morning. Zheng Luo was hopeful and worried. I hope they can arrive safely. Let's hope so. The shamaness looked at the conspicuous figure walking down the mountain step by step. She turned to leave with Zheng Luo. Xiao Xian could walk so easily in the snow. One of them was old and the other was injured. They couldn't stay in this environment for too long. After walking for a while, Xiao Xian's body was already sweating. He took a short break to adjust himself before continuing. A 3-meter wide road appeared where Xiao Xian walked. The snow on the road was pushed away, leaving only the earth. However, the falling snow soon covered the ground in a layer of white. Plop, plop. The snow wall in front of them became even harder because of the pressure, and it bulged upward in an arc. The further he walked, the harder the snow wall became. It made it harder for Xiao Xian to walk. Every time Xiao Xian took a step, the snow on the wall would squeak and squeak. At the foot of the mountain, the soldiers in charge of patrolling carried shovels and went to rest in the temporary shelter they made. The so-called temporary shelter was, in fact, a narrower side road that they dug next to the road that they had cleared. Then, at the end of the side road, they opened up a square area about 3 meters in length and width. The 20 soldiers who were sweeping the snow were currently huddled in this 3-meter-high shelter. They leaned against the solid snow wall and talked. The cold wind was still blowing. There was wind here too, but the wind was weaker here. It wasn't as cold as before. This damn weather, when will it stop? A soldier complained. Who knows? After I'm done here, I have to go back and clear the roof. Otherwise, the house will collapse. I heard that this is a disaster that happens once in 1,000 years. I don't know how it is in other places. It's more than 1,000 years. I heard that it doesn't happen once in 10,000 years. The patrolling soldiers hid in the temporary shelter and chatted. As they were talking, a A soldier sitting against the snow wall suddenly had a large piece of snow fall on his head. Ouch! The soldier quickly brushed the snow off his head. It didn't hurt, but the cold made him feel even colder. The others standing against the wall couldn't help but look up at the snow wall. How could such a large piece of snow fall? Was it blown by the wind? Be careful, more snow is falling. At the edge of the snow wall, pieces of snow bulged and fell outwards as if someone was pushing them. The soldiers near the snow wall quickly moved away. What's that sound? Plop, plop. Crack, crack. The sound was getting clearer. The 20 soldiers forgot to shiver and stared nervously. Crack, crack. The snow wall cracked and slid down the mountain. Oh no, run. Some of the soldiers had gone to the mountains further away for hunting. There was snow and ice there all year round. It was said that if you stomped on the ground or shouted at the top of the mountain, you would encounter a torrent of snow rushing down. Could it be that this happened in the tribe? It shouldn't be. The mountain in the tribe wasn't high and the slope wasn't steep. The snow wouldn't slide down. No matter what, it was best to avoid it. The 20 soldiers quickly retreated along the side road. After retreating for a distance, they looked in that direction again. The place where they were originally standing had been replaced by falling snow. And there, it looked like a white giant worm was crawling down the mountain, bit by bit. It was quite rhythmic. The patrolling soldiers carried big shovels and looked at everything in front of them in shock. They were still wondering what was going on. They stood there for a long time until they sensed the breath of Xiao Xian. Elder! Elder! Chapter 477. Ever since they knew the consequences of Xiao Xian's training over there, the patrolling warriors' interest was to wait there after they finished sweeping the snow. The side road was still there, so they directly retreated from the temporary resting point and turned it into a shelter. Originally, the patrolling warriors wanted to follow the original method and make an open-air resting point, but that would also cause them to freeze and be blown by the cold wind. One day, Xiao Xian suddenly remembered a method. He taught them to use simple tools and water to make large ice bricks. The water in the river had been frozen thick, so they couldn't go there to break the ice. They could only melt the snow themselves and pour it into the tools. After freezing it for a while, ice bricks would be formed in just a few breaths. It was very efficient. Such ice bricks were quickly accepted by the people in the tribe, and even some warriors who were not on duty came out to help. Now, from the top of the mountain to the bottom, there were many igloos scattered in an I shape. The foundation of the igloos was also made of ice. They were piled high above the snow, and then the houses were built on top of it. The patrolling warriors would go to the igloos to rest and drink some hot water to warm up their bodies. From here, they could see the situation further away. The people in the tribe who had been locked up at home would also go for a walk or two out of curiosity. Xiao Xian was also worried that these people would suffer from snow blindness because of facing the snow for a long time. So he reminded them. But until now, no one had suffered from snow blindness. Look, the elder is pushing the snow again. The people lying on the window of the igloos looked outside and said, "Where is it? Let me see." There were 3 small windows, but people rushed to see. These igloos were built close to the first road that Xiao Xian pushed out. Xiao Xian would walk along a new road every day. From a high vantage point, one could see a person wrapped in flames walking slowly on the white snow. And in front of him, there seemed to be a giant white worm moving down the mountain. Apart from the initial shock, the patrolling soldiers now treated this as their daily entertainment. The tribe worshipped the strong. Not to mention the cold they had to endure when walking in the snow in the stormy weather, they had also tried to push the snow. Unfortunately, the seemingly insignificant snow piled up together was exceptionally firm and heavy. They could not push it after piling it up for a while. Usually, they thought that they were quite strong. Duo Kong walked in from outside, patted the snow off his body, and asked, "How is the sentry post at the foot of the mountain?" Tao Zheng and the others are continuing today. They said they want to make it a bit higher so that they can see far away from the top. They won't have to go out and suffer from the cold, a warrior said. It's a good thing to use ice bricks as sentry posts, but don't slack off. I'm going to check. Duo Kong scolded. Yes, I promise I won't slack off. Yes. Duo Kong nodded and pushed the person by the window aside, looking outside. Let me see how Xiao Xian's pushing snow is going. The warrior standing at the side pursed his lips. Wasn't it just to snatch the window? He even scolded them with a stern face. At the foot of the mountain, on the opposite side of the river, tall sentry posts were built. Large ice bricks were continuously sent there. After building a few outposts, the warriors had nothing to do, so they tried to connect the outposts together. They used ice bricks to create a path so that they wouldn't have to brave the wind and snow when they moved around. Moreover, it looked like they had built a city wall. Looking at the path that was built comparable to a city wall, the patrolling warriors were even more motivated. This kind of snowy weather was not without fun. For those who had nothing to do, it was another kind of experience. The beasts in the forest rarely appeared now. In this kind of weather, it was impossible to go out to hunt. Fortunately, everyone had a lot of food, so they would not starve. If they ate sparingly, they could still survive as long as this kind of snowy weather did not continue. Many people in the tribe did not know that a team of 50 people was braving the snow and leaving the forest. These people were sent out by the chief and the shamaness. Although they might miss the most important ritual of the year, the shamaness and the chief specially allowed them to be absent. This was because to the shamaness and the chief, this matter was more important than the ritual. It concerned the future of the tribe. The leader was called Xiang Chun. He was slightly younger than Duo Kong and was also an advanced totemic warrior. However, in the past year, he had not been in the tribe for most of the time. Xiang Chun was part of the first group to follow Xiao Xian to the seaside. He had walked the road from the tribe to the seaside twice. This was his third time. This time, Xiang Chun was ordered to bring people to the seaside to see the situation there. According to other people's thoughts, why would they go out in such cold weather? However, the shamaness and the chief wanted this kind of weather. The shamaness and the chief even hoped that the cold weather would last as long as it did as they thought. The path Xiang Chun took was different from the one Xiao Xian took when he first found the tribe. When Xiao Xian first went from the seaside to the tribe, he almost walked in a straight line. However, it was more difficult to walk that way. Later on, the people of the tribe took another route to the seaside. They walked out of the forest with difficulty. When they passed by Ambus City, they found that Ambus City, which was not too deserted in the past, was now deserted outside the city. There were shadows walking around the towers on the city walls, but no one else could be seen anywhere else. They wanted to find a place to rest in Ambus City in exchange for some food. Now, it seemed that this plan was not successful. The city gates were closed, and no one was allowed to enter. "Let's continue," Xiang Qin called out to the others. Compared to the forest, there was less snow here. Perhaps in the eyes of the people of Ambus City, this was a heavy snow that had not been seen in 1,000 years. Even walking was difficult. However, Xiang Chun and the others who walked out of the forest did not think so. The snow here was only waist deep. Every time they met someone on the road and overheard them talking about the snow is already waist deep, how are we going to survive? Xiang Chun and the others couldn't help but say, "It's only waist deep, and you're already so shocked. If you go into the forest, will your eyeballs fall out of your sockets?" Along the way, they also encountered robbers, but very few. In this kind of weather, professional robbers were not willing to come out. Those who came out were amateurs. They were forced out by the wind and snow. Due to hunger and cold, their eyes became fierce, and they looked ready to risk everything. Unfortunately, Xiang Chun and the others were not merciful people. If they were so soft-hearted, they would not have lived until now. If these robbers only begged and spoke softly, perhaps Xiang Chun and the others could give them some food. However, if they stood in front of them with knives, they could not be blamed for being merciless. Fresh blood splattered on the snow and quickly froze with the water. Those who fell there would be lucky to be covered by the snow, but unlucky ones would become the targets of others who were hungry and cold. Along the way, Xiang Chun had seen too many. The further they walked, the thinner the snow became. Xiang Chun's heart sank. Although he did not like this snow disaster, according to the shamaness and the chief, it might be best if this cold weather continued. Most importantly, had the sea frozen? This was the shamanist's hope. The shamaness said that if the sea froze, they should continue forward. If there was a large patch of ice, this would be an opportunity. They could return to their old haunt after 1,000 years and reunite with the other group. Perhaps the Yinjiao's hidden disease could be cured. Who would not want to live twice as long? They would not have to consider leaving the hunting team after hunting for another 20 or 30 years, and then have to watch people from other tribes who were older than them hunt bravely in the forest. Just thinking about it was miserable. Please don't freeze. Please don't. After leaving Amba City, they passed by a smaller city. It was the same as Amba City. The city gates were tightly shut, and there was a solemn and heavy atmosphere, just like the hearts of the people in the city. But there, the snow only reached their thighs. As they continued forward, Xiangqin's bad feeling grew stronger. When they finally stepped into the semi-desert, Xiangqin panted and looked into the distance. Here, the snow only reached their knees. They continued forward step by step into this once dry land. There were camel beasts looking for ice on the ground. Their fur had grown long, and they huddled together in groups for warmth, eating snow to replenish their water. When they saw Xiangqin's group, the camel beasts turned around and ran away. Xiangqin did not chase. He still had food on him, and he was not in the mood to hunt. His footsteps quickened as he headed straight for the sea. Tall cylindrical cacti stood there like icicles. They were like thorns, stabbing at Xiangqin's group until their hearts bled. The sea did not freeze. Only the areas near the sea were partially frozen. But that ice was nothing compared to the layer of ice in the man-made river in front of the tribe. Could people walk on it? Not to mention, the sea was still flowing far away from the shore. The wind lifted the waves, crashing against the frozen ice. The blue sea, the snow-covered sand, the clash of two colors. To some people, this was a rare beauty. But Xiangqin's group was utterly disappointed. It was as if they had lost all their strength. Their exhaustion intensified. They knelt on the snow-covered sand, punching holes in the ground. Their path was cut off. They didn't even know if there was any hope of crossing this sea in their lifetime. How long was a person's life? For people who did the same thing every day, it seemed to pass in the blink of an eye. Xiangqin seemed to see his old self sitting at the door, chopping wood and making straw rope. But the people of the same age as him in the neighboring tribe were happily dragging their prey back and forth every day. He could not bear to think about it anymore. With a sigh and a strong sense of disappointment, Xiangqin's group returned to the tribe. If the shamaness knew, she would probably cry herself to death by the fire pit. How long would they have to wait to return to their homeland? Where was the road? None of them knew. Chapter 478. Royal City. This year's snow caught everyone in Royal City off guard. Even the Yi family did not foresee such a disaster. At most, they predicted that it would snow early and snow heavily. These were all predicted. Even the approximate time of the snow was announced. However, no one would have thought that the so-called heavy snow was actually such a situation. Everyone was frowning all day. In the fields outside the city, a large number of crops had died. Recently, every field owner's mood was like a blizzard. The slaves were trembling in fear, afraid of being beaten to death or thrown out of the royal city fields. Beating them to death was fine, but if they were thrown out, they would be tortured by the cold. How could they survive in the snow outside that was half the height of a person? Inside the golden grain fields, it was also gloomy. The field owner, Jiju, had thrown a few tantrums recently. The senior and junior stewards all shrunk their heads and did not dare to make a fuss. Jiju's anger was not directed at his subordinates. Although he complained about the weather, the ones he scolded the most were the Yi family. A bunch of trash. Pa, an exquisitely designed teapot with colorful patterns was thrown out and smashed to pieces. 2 copper plates were also smashed to the ground with a clatter. The junior stewards outside trembled. They did not dare to step in. They just stood there like ostriches. Inside the house, the senior steward waited for Jiju to calm down before lowering his head to tidy up the things on the ground. There were no other servants here. Only the senior steward came in and out often. The junior stewards had to stay far away unless they were permitted. The house was warm with a stove burning. Jeju sat cross-legged on a thick, furry cushion. He was in a bad mood because another crop in the field had frozen to death. Even though they were prepared for the cold, they still could not withstand this kind of weather. How many times had this happened since winter? 7 times? 8 times? In the past, even if other fields had crops frozen to death in winter, it rarely happened in the golden grain fields. Jeju saw this as a mistake. As long as he did the right thing, he could avoid it. Jeju had always felt that he had done a perfect job. The 1,000 grain gold incident was a little depressing because the Yin Jiao people had planned it first, but passed quickly. Now the 8th mistake had occurred. How could he, who had always pursued perfection, remain calm? Although it was due to the weather, it was a fact that something had happened. It couldn't be denied. Trash! Jeju scolded again. The trash he was referring to was still the Yi family. Usually, those people would raise their chins to the sky, but now? He couldn't even answer when asked when the weather would improve. What a piece of trash. Jeju wanted to ask the most powerful old man in the Yi family. Unfortunately, the old man had been in seclusion for years. Even if Jeju went personally, the old man would not come out and help with the divination. What's going on outside? Jeju drank some hot water to moisten his throat and asked. The chief steward quickly glanced at the few figures shivering in the cold outside. He bowed and replied, I heard that they are here to deliver a message. What message? Jeju's tone was getting worse. The chief steward bowed even lower, not daring to look at Jeju's face. They say, someone wants your grains, Bam. Jeju slammed the copper cup in his hand on the ground. Tell them to scram. The chief steward paused and did not leave immediately. Instead, he said, I heard that another tribe came to seek refuge in the royal city. The king asked the other nobles to give some grains as a loan to the new tribe. They didn't come before. Now that there's a snow disaster, they all came quickly. Jeju's tone was sarcastic, but he didn't take it to heart. No, if the others want to give, let them. Our golden grain fields won't give. The nobles of the royal city did intend to take advantage of this snow disaster to take in a few more tribes. It was fine at first, but now the snow showed no signs of stopping. More and more tribes came to seek refuge. Settling them down was difficult. There was a serious shortage of food. The higher-ups were troubled. Even the grains in the hands of the nobles were not enough. Knowing that the fields had a bountiful harvest today, they all came to Jeju, hoping that he would provide some support. After all, the more people who came to seek refuge, the bigger the kingdom would be. It would be far from the influence of the tribes. Receiving Jeju's message, the chief steward did not speak. He only listened to Jeju. As for the others, it was none of his business. A few junior stewards who had been given important tasks by the other nobles were called in by Jeju and scolded. 2 of them were even stripped of their duties. No matter how much the junior steward cried and begged, Jeju ignored him. Just as the 2 junior stewards were feeling gloomy, someone rushed in from outside. It was a guard from the fields, one who was in charge of guarding the 1,000 grain gold. Seeing someone rush in without notifying him, Jeju was about to explode in anger. But when he saw who it was, he suppressed his anger and asked nervously, Did something happen over there? No, it's not. The person panted. His face was red, either from excitement or from the cold. Is it yes or no? Jeju was angry. Master, over there it's ripened. The 2 words jumped out of the guard's mouth. As soon as he heard ripened, Jeju rushed out. The junior steward, who was still sobbing in the room, thought quickly. If something good happened over there and the master was in a good mood, would he be able to plead for leniency? Thinking of this, the 2 junior stewards did not care about their fur coats and rushed out as well. Jeju's 1,000 grain gold had ripened in the middle of the snowstorm, much earlier than he had expected. In the snow, the golden husks were dazzling. Even the guards outside could smell an extremely fragrant smell. The smell was not strong, but made people drool. Jeju personally harvested the grains and carefully peeled off one of them. After removing the golden husks, the grains inside were white. Jeju's eyes narrowed. He remembered something he had asked Xiaoxian before. Xiaoxian, what color do you think the grains in my field will be in the end? White. White. That was what Xiaoxian had answered back then. It's really white. Jiju felt that the ripening of the 1,000-grain gold was a hint to him. Just one grain of white 1,000-grain gold was enough to fill a person's stomach for at least a day. It was not an illusion either. They were truly full. When the royal city needed grains the most, the 1,000-grain gold had ripened. Jiju looked at the snow outside in silence. After a while, he said to the senior steward, "Call them over." They referred to those small stewards just now. Jiju decided to open the barn to sell the grains. He did not have a good impression of those who only came to seek shelter now, but he was willing to follow the hint of the 1,000-grain gold. Even if he was wrong in the end, at least he had tried. At that moment, a few special guests came to the royal city's family. Because everyone was talking about the new tribe, they did not pay much attention to these people. They thought they were from the same tribe. The people who came to the family were the fox chief and the flirtatious woman. When they escaped from the salt flats, there were only 100 of them left. They did not manage to escape back to the tribe. Because of the king beast pursuit, they changed directions at the last minute. Otherwise, they would have been in a worse state. The rest of the Shun tribe became bait to lure the king beast away. That was the only way they could escape. After leaving the salt flats, the fox chief led the rest of his people away. They did not return to the tribe. Instead, they left the forest. If they returned to the tribe like this, they would lose the salt mine, the fire crystals, and so many people. They would despise him, and he would lose his position as chief. That was why the fox chief decided to find a solution before returning to the tribe. The woman beside the fox chief was half family blood. However, her divination skills were not outstanding. She would not be treated well if she stayed with the family. That was why she spent most of her time in the fox tribe. However, the fox tribe and the family still interacted frequently. The fox chief knew roughly when the weather would change because of the family's help. This time, the fox chief came to ask for help. He wanted to work with the family to deal with the Yinjiao tribe. The family might not agree to deal with the Mountain Wind and Taihe tribes. Even if they won, it would be a devastating victory. It would not be worth it. However, if they were going to deal with the Flaming Horns, they would have to reconsider. Because the Yinjiao were outsiders. The family and the other families in the royal city were wary of them. The fox chief heard this from the woman beside him. She had learned this when they came to the royal city in winter. This was the perfect time to make things worse. Although the fox chief wanted to get rid of all 3 tribes, he had to do it one by one. First, he had to deal with the Yinjiao tribe. Along the way, the fox chief had thought about many things. The more he thought, the more he hated the Yinjiao people. That was why they were in such dire straits. That was why when he spoke to the family, the fox chief made many guesses. The Yinjiao people seemed to know when the weather will change. They are even more accurate than you. They came at the right time and left just as the storm stopped. It was just a guess, and the fox chief did not believe it himself. But in order to instill fear in the family, he had to be sure. Also, I heard the king beast roar at them, but I didn't see their bodies. Even if they were eaten by the king beast, it shouldn't have eaten them all. There wasn't even a trace of blood. They also brought a lot of salt and fire crystals. The fox chief added fuel to the fire. When they heard that someone was more accurate than the family, the faces of the family members changed. When they heard that someone could leave alive after being eaten by the king beast, they became even more fearful. The fire crystals were not as attractive. "Are you telling the truth?" The person sitting at the head of the table asked in a low voice. He did not want to pursue the matter of the fox hiding the salt. It was just salt. The family did not care about it. But the other things were different. "It's true." The fox chief looked at the woman beside him. She hurriedly stood up and bowed. "It's true." When she lowered her head, a strange light flashed in her eyes. The fox leader probably did not believe his own words, but she knew that it was the truth. The Yinjiao people seemed to have an even bigger secret. The family did not believe everything the 2 of them said. But when they questioned the other fox tribesmen who came with the fox chief, they believed most of it. The family asked questions skillfully. They did not believe that the tribesmen could lie to them. That was why even if the fox chief's words were not entirely true, most of it was the truth. A few of the Yi family's most powerful people gathered for a discussion. I told you, we have to be careful of the Yinjiao people. The Yinjiao people cannot be allowed to live. I will go to the king tomorrow and discuss this with the other families, said the person sitting at the head of the table. The Yinjiao people had to be dealt with. Perhaps this change in the weather was a hint from the heavens. Chapter 479. Any member of the Yi family who was slightly better at divination would feel an indescribable sense of danger. It was not the type that would destroy them, but it would always distract them from other things. Their minds would be in turmoil, but the divination would not yield any results. This was a very unpleasant feeling. For the Yi family who prided themselves on being able to see into the future, this was like a knife hanging over their heads. This year's snowstorm was like a slap to their faces. Ever since the weather became like this, many people had paid the Yi family handsomely for a hint, but there was a limit to what the Yi family could do. The arrival of the Fox Chief was, without a doubt, another way for them to vent their frustrations. It also gave them a hint to ease their discomfort. Perhaps it was because of the Yinjiao people that they felt threatened. Didn't the one from the Yi family make a prophecy? The aristocrats of the 6 tribes had been worried about what the prophecy was referring to. The last time the Yinjiao people came to the royal city, they sent the Linlu chief flying with one blow and destroyed the royal city gates. This was enough to strike fear into the people of the royal city. Back then, some people had linked the Yinjiao people to the previous divination results and suggested that Yinjiao was a threat, but most people did not believe it. But now, after hearing the Fox Chief's words, the Yi family began a plan. The next day, the head of the Yi family went to the palace to discuss with the king and the other aristocrats. To them, if there was a threat, they had to nip it in the bud. They could not give it a chance to grow. When that young man from Yinjiao destroyed the royal city gates, some people had already begun to speculate. Now, there was an even bigger problem. The Yinjiao people can predict the weather more accurately. Forget about the weather. Can the Yinjiao people really fight against a beast king? This was something to be wary of. With such a dangerous tribe around, they could not help but feel uneasy when they thought about the divination conclusion that the world will be divided after a long time and the world will be united after a long time. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was heavy. Once a cloud of suspicion formed in one's heart, it would be difficult to disperse. This was especially true for those who had been suspicious for a long time. Now that they finally found a suspected breakthrough, they would definitely not give up. If the Yinjiao people knew what these people were talking about, they would probably vomit blood. Bullshit. If they could fight against the Beast King, why would they give up so much high-quality salt and fire crystals? However, once these people think you're a threat, it's hard to convince them otherwise. The cold winter will pass. This winter came early and ferociously, but it also left late. When the wind and snow finally stopped, when the sun finally broke through the thick, dark clouds and shone on the earth, the people who had been gloomy for a long time looked up to the sky and roared. The weather turned sunny, and winter was officially over. The temperature rose quickly, not giving people enough time to adjust. The tribesmen were clearing the thick snow. In fact, most of it had already been cleared by Xiaoxian. In most places, the snow was knee-deep. These were all cleared by Xiaoxian when he was practicing. The densely populated areas were also cleaned every day, so they did not have to deal with the melting snow. Water was dripping from the eaves, and everywhere in the tribe was wet. The patrolling warriors were reluctant to leave as they watched the ice brick sentry posts slowly melt. They had not had enough fun, but relatively speaking, they still preferred warmer weather. That way, they could go out and hunt. The melting snow made the river in front of the tribe rise a lot. The people near the foot of the mountain had to move up. There was a lot of water in many places in the forest. It was inconvenient to go out and hunt. However, the large amount of stagnant water also caused some animals to come out of their burrows to hide. The soldiers also encountered many small beasts as they walked around the area. The ducks that had been frozen all winter rushed out of the duck shed. They were not afraid of the cold. They jumped into the river or flew into the forest. The person who took care of the duck shed finally he saw the fat duck. The fat duck walked out with a group of similar-looking green furballs. It looked at everyone with caution, but did not attack. 31. Not one is missing. The person said happily, "Hey, what are the ducklings eating?" Xiao Xian looked over. "It's probably an earthworm." Before Xiao Xian could finish the word earthworm, he saw a thumb-sized worm being pecked by the green furry balls. It opened its mouth full of sharp teeth. Probably an insect that crawled out from the ground. Xiao Xian could only say so. He did not know what these earthworm-like insects were called. They had never crawled out before. Now, they were probably forced out by the melting snow. There were also some wriggling or crawling insects that came out from the river in front of the tribe. The river rose and flooded what used to be the ground. Now, these insects were scrambling to climb higher. This was a great advantage for the ducks. The fat duck led the 31 green fur balls to peck at the rising river. They ate what the other ducks ate. They ate what the other ducks did not eat. With this group of ducks, the people in the tribe did not have to kill the insects themselves. The ducks jumped around the riverbank. Some even fought for food. The weather turned warm quickly. Yesterday, they were still wearing thick furs. Today, they only wore their usual hunting clothes. The people who worked were sweating all over. "This weather is too strange," said Xiao Xian. He did not know what this weather change meant. Since the weather was really warm, winter was over. The tribe would hold their annual ceremony. However, the shamaness was distracted. Not only was she distracted, but so was Chief Zheng Luo. He often stood at the top of the mountain and looked into the distance. Xiao Xian knew that they were waiting for news. They were waiting for the people who left in winter to bring back good news. Even if they did not make it this time, what if the next winter was the same? Then they could seize the opportunity. However, Xiao Xian had a feeling that the shamaness and the chief's plan might not work. 2 days later, all the snow in the tribe was cleared. The wet ground was much drier after 3 days of sun. The river receded quickly too. No one knew where the water went. The river in front of the tribe was connected to another river outside. It was blocked by something, so the dangerous creatures in the other river could not come over. However, the water flowed. Now, the rising river was obviously receding every day. In a few days, it would reach the water level before winter. That night, the ceremony went on as usual. The people who were sent out in winter had not returned. This was within everyone's expectations. It took time to travel, and it took even longer to travel in the snow. This year's ceremony was especially quiet. The shamaness and the chief were not in the mood. Those who knew were also distracted. However, for the ceremony and to respect their ancestors, they temporarily put aside their emotions. Even if they wanted to think about something, they would have to wait until the ceremony was over. As the shamaness chanted, the flames in the fire pit rose. The heat of the flames chased away the remaining chill of the night. Xiao Xian's bow and ornaments also reacted. They were almost connected to the flames in the fire pit. The rising flames gradually formed a flame giant. The tribe was no longer surprised by the appearance of this flame giant. However, this time, the flame giant gave Xiao Xian a different feeling. The power of inheritance in his body did not run wild. In other words, the flame giant's appearance was the result of the bone ornament's own power. It was similar to the previous ceremonies. It was not under Xiao Xian's control. After seeing the flame giant, the people in the tribe all knelt down. Even the most arrogant warriors and the elders who liked to throw tantrums knelt down respectfully. Especially the warriors who went to the salt mines with Zheng Luo. They were especially pious. Without the protection of their ancestors, they would not have been able to escape from the king beast. Xiao Xian looked up at the flame giant in the sky. At this time last year, the flame giant slowly turned and stood in the direction Xiao Xian had come from. Today, the flame giant also turned and faced the familiar direction. The difference was that after turning, it raised an arm and pointed in that direction. Many people in the tribe saw this. Those who had lowered their heads also looked up in the direction of the flame giant. What was the ancestor hinting at? The shamaness was shocked. She stood by the fire pit in a daze, looking at the flame giant in the sky. Only when the flame giant disappeared did the shamaness continue the ceremony. When the ceremony was over, everyone dispersed. They discussed the meaning of the ancestor pointing in that direction during the ceremony. By the fire pit, after the ceremony, only a small flame was left in the fire pit. It was not bright. The shamaness was still standing there. "Xiao Xian, did you hear that?" asked the shamaness. "Hear what?" Xiao Xian was confused. The ancestor's voice. The shamaness closed her eyes. "What did the ancestors say?" Xiao Xian asked. The shamaness did not speak. After a moment of silence, she said, "It's time to go back." Xiao Xian looked at the shamaness in surprise. He was sure that the shamaness was serious. "You plan to move?" "That's right. The ancestor's appearance just now was an indication," said the shamaness. "But how we get there? Don't we have to wait for Xiangchen to bring back news?" Xiao Xian asked. "Xiangchen might not bring back good news." The shamaness sighed. "But the ancestor is telling us that it's time to go back." That was what the shamaness thought. Since the ancestor said it was time to go back, then it was time to act. As for what method to use, they had to think of it themselves. However, the shamaness did not think that the ancestor was making things difficult for them. Perhaps the ancestor already had a way. They just didn't know about it. Xiao Xian was thinking about the shamaness words when he sensed something. He looked up and saw the shamaness staring at him. "Why are you looking at me?" The shamaness smiled. "Maybe the ancestor will tell you the way to leave." That would depend on the ancestor's spirit, Xiao Xian thought to himself. At the same time, on the other side of the sea, in the fearsome beast forest in the Yinjiao tribe, the old shamaness stood by the fire pit. She looked at the fire seed in the fire pit and thought about the flame giant that had appeared during the ceremony. The giant raised an arm and pointed in the direction it was facing. What did this mean? The old man stood there for a long time, enjoying the night breeze. Chapter 480. 2 days after the ceremony, someone from the Mountain Wind tribe hurried over. It was their chief. "Where's your chief? I need to talk to him." The Mountain Wind chief asked the Yinjiao patrol to bring him to Zhengluo. "If Zhengluo isn't here, your elder is fine too." Ever since the salt mine incident, the Mountain Wind tribesmen were more cautious of Yinjiao's young elder. They did not underestimate him. If it wasn't for Xiao Xian, they would not have been able to return safely. "The chief and elder are here." The patrol sent someone to report and brought the Mountain Wind tribesmen up the mountain. After the salt mine incident, Yinjiao and Mountain Wind tribesmen got along a little better. Seeing Lan Mu's serious expression, it seemed like there was something very important. The guide did not waste any time and hurried up the mountain. According to tradition, after winter and the ceremony, they would welcome the first hunt of the year. In previous years, the important people of the tribe would gather at the top of the mountain for a meeting to prepare for the hunt. Today, they were gathered as well. However, they were not discussing the hunt, but other things. The shamaness told everyone about the instructions she received at the ceremony. She also mentioned her idea. However, they did not know how to leave just yet, so the meeting froze halfway through. No one was willing to migrate the entire tribe before finding a solution. There were too many variables. This was not a joke, and they could not afford to do so. Just then, someone came to report that the Mountain Wind chief had come personally. It seemed like something important had happened. Zhengluo told the others to go back and think about it. They would continue the meeting tomorrow. The frequency of meetings had increased significantly since winter. Seeing Lan Mu, Zhengluo's heart sank. He knew that Mountain Wind had been planning to attack the Fox tribe after the snow ended. If the Fox tribesmen did not return safely from the salt mine, the Fox tribe would be greatly weakened and Mountain Wind would have a chance to strike. However, seeing Lan Mu's expression, it did not seem like something good had happened. Did the Fox tribesmen return safely too? What? Did something happen at the Fox tribe? Asked Zhengluo. More than that. Lan Mu sat down and told Zhengluo what he knew. During the winter, after we returned, we did not send anyone over to check on the Fox tribe situation due to the snowstorm. A few days ago, we thought that winter was about to end, so we sent someone over to check. Who would have thought that the fox people were migrating? There were too few people who went to investigate, so we didn't stop them directly. We didn't have a chance to kill them at all. By the time we got there, most of the people there had already evacuated. There were only a few injured people who couldn't walk anymore. Ramu was angry when he said this. He had been preparing for this for the whole winter, and now he had encountered this situation. "Where did the fox people move to?" asked Zheng Luo. Lamu glanced at Xiao Xian, who was sitting next to him. "Royal City. They're going to the Royal City." This was what he had forced out of the few injured personnel who had been left behind. Royal City? They joined the Royal City. Zheng Luo was surprised. It seems that not many people from the salt mines returned safely. Otherwise, they wouldn't have migrated to the Royal City so easily. That's right. According to what I heard, less than 20 Shin tribesmen returned from the salt mines. They were all heavily injured too. The fox tribesmen probably aren't any better. But, get to the point. Xiao Xian, who had been quiet all this while, spoke up. What Lamu knew must have something to do with him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have kept glancing at them. Lamu paused. "I heard that Elder Xiao Xian went to the royal city before winter." "Yes," answered Xiao Xian. "The 6 major cities issued a bounty for the capture of the Yinjiao tribesmen. I heard it's because of the destruction of the royal city's walls." When Lamu first heard the news, he was surprised. The Yinjiao tribesmen were too strong. They even destroyed the royal city's walls. The Mountain Wind tribe was relatively well informed. Their tribe was located on the outskirts of the forest. He didn't know how they got the news so quickly. It could have been a bird or something else. In any case, the Mountain Wind tribe was a cut above the rest when it came to information. Since Lamu said so, it was most likely true. "You want to attack the Yinjiao tribe just by destroying their walls?" said Zheng Luo angrily. "That's a far-fetched reason. Their walls aren't strong enough. One touch and it breaks. You're blaming us for being strong." Lamu's face twitched. "What do you mean by one touch and it breaks? That's the royal city's walls, not your backyard's fence. If it were me, I'd be afraid too. Rumor has it that the weather changed this past winter because of the Yinjiao tribe. I also heard." Lamu glanced at Zheng Luo and the other's sour expressions. He continued, "I also heard that the Yinjiao tribesmen lured out a king beast that lives in the snow. It'll bring about an even greater disaster." "Bullshit." Zheng Luo's face darkened. Why was the Yinjiao tribesman taking all the blame? "You believe that?" "I don't, but there must be other reasons. It might have something to do with the Fox tribe or something else. But the news about them attacking you must be true. I came as soon as I heard the news. After all, he'd experienced it himself. If the Yinjiao tribesmen really had something to do with the king beast, would they have been in such a sorry state? But to say they had nothing to do with it, Lamu still doubted it. After all, only one person knew how they'd escaped from the king beast and what had happened after they'd fainted. Thinking of this, Lamu glanced at Xiao Xian again suspiciously. His eyes met Xiao Xian's, and Lamu's heart skipped a beat. He quickly looked away. He didn't want to provoke this young man now. Who knew which idiot's idea was to blame the Yinjiao tribesmen for the weather change? How could a tribe affect the weather so easily? Were the people who believed that idiots? But there were many who believed it and treated the Yinjiao tribesmen like the plague. Lamu only told them what he knew as a way of thanking Yinjiao for their help at the salt mines. Before he left, Lamu thought about it and asked, "You Yinjiao people really came from somewhere else?" Zheng Luo's eyelid twitched. Clearly, this was the most important reason why the others were targeting Yinjiao. Their Yinjiao tribe didn't belong to this land. It was just that thousands of years had passed and many people had forgotten. Many people thought the Yinjiao tribe came from somewhere else, but didn't know that 1,000 years ago, they didn't even exist here. Lamu opened his mouth, but in the end, he shook his head and sighed. "You all should be careful." It seemed to be a natural instinct to exclude others. Back then, the Yinjiao tribe left the crowded areas and settled here for 2 reasons. 1, they liked the living environment here. 2, they wanted people to forget Yinjiao's origins. The ancestral record said that when the Yinjiao people first arrived, they were ostracized and lost many people. Were they going to experience it again? After Lamu left, Xiangchun and the others finally returned with similar news. Amba City had already posted notice saying that the Yinjiao people had been demonized. When Xiangchun and the others were hiding, they even heard people talking about Yinjiao's strength. Was it wrong for them to be strong? Xiao Xian didn't know how many people believed the rumors, but Xiao Xian was sure that if there was a reward and a secret leak about the salt and fire crystals, there would be even more people willing to go. These people were planning to slowly encroach on the Flaming Horn tribe's power. They didn't plan to attack them directly. If the Great Six wanted to attack Yinjiao, they didn't have to do it themselves. They knew that Yinjiao wasn't easy to deal with. This was a good time for the greedy and dependent to make contributions. Also, they heard that the royal city had taken in many people during the winter and gave them so many benefits. Would the slave masters really do that? In the forest, due to competition, the tribes didn't interact much. The only good collaborator was the neighboring Taiha tribe. The Mountain Wind people were just returning the favor and didn't want to get involved. But it was understandable. It's time to leave. The shamaness got up and walked outside. She stood on the peak of the mountain and looked at the budding trees in the distance. Rather than wait for people to come and provoke them, it was better to leave now. Their ancestors' instructions couldn't be wrong. Zheng Luo called for an emergency meeting. Not long after, the entire tribe was mobilized. Zheng Luo took the time to visit the neighboring Taiha tribe's chief. Since Lamu had come to Yinjiao, he would naturally go to the nearby Taiha tribe to say goodbye. That was why the Taiha chief already knew about Yinjiao's current situation. He thought that Zheng Luo had come to ask for help. After being neighbors for so many years, the Taiha people were willing to help. He didn't expect Zheng Luo to come to say goodbye. Knowing that the Taiha people were willing to help, Zheng Luo was already very grateful. They had been neighbors for so many years. They had quarreled, fought, but in the end, it was still this neighbor who was willing to help them. Perhaps this was the reason why their overbearing ancestors were willing to be neighbors with the Taiha people. After thanking him, Zheng Luo told him why he was here. "I'm here to say goodbye." Zheng Luo looked at his old rival, who was much older than him. "Leave." The Taiha chief almost dropped the bronze cup he used to show off. What did he mean? Was he afraid of being targeted by the six tribes? Was he going to hide in a more secluded place? The Yinjiao people they knew weren't this cowardly. Aren't they just a bunch of arrogant nobles? If we build our own city, we can call ourselves nobles too. Why should we be afraid of them? Don't care what they say. Just pretend they're talking nonsense. At most, we won't leave the forest. In the forest, we still have the advantage," said the Taiha chief unhappily. "We're from another continent," said Zheng Luo. "I know. What does it matter where we're from? Could it be that you don't dare to fight?" The Taiha chief didn't think it was a big deal. It was rare to have a neighbor, and they didn't want to lose him. It would help them carry things when they went on a trade trip. "No, we're just going back." Although Zheng Luo didn't know why the shaman was so confident, he just had to believe in her. Go back. What did she mean? The Taiha chief didn't understand until Zheng Luo left. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.